2 copies, Mr. Odero.
Tried to sue me for it, and I gave them the survey, so. Can we have 10 minutes?
What?
Can we have 10 minutes?
Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order, 9:01. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. And we usually take a moment to pray in some form, an invocation they call it. I've come to the theological conclusion that the real wisdom doesn't come from above, but from the sides. And it's thank you to all of you members who collectively give us a lot of wisdom when we make our deliberations. Thank you. I don't know if you agree with that theological.
I'm willing to receive wisdom wherever it comes from.
Sure.
Yeah.
First public hearing on vacating 180001 Denora Boulevard, 300 Denora Boulevard, the Oderanos. Jack, would you care to swear in?
Well, I think we will, as long as everybody's here. If you're going to testify in regards to this matter, please rise and raise your right hand for me. All matters. All matters, and let's do it all at once here. For the TPI matters and all the public hearings. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Very well.
Thanks, Jack. Any ex parte on the first issue of 300 Denora? Megan, no? No. Jane, no? No, but Dan? No. Nope. I drove by it too, but I didn't, couldn't see much, so.
I mean, if we talk in Google Earth and things like that, because you can't see anything from the front. I did do some
I didn't hear what you said.
Google Earth, so when you want to look in somebody's backyard.
Oh,
Applicant first, Jason? Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Odierno, would you care to please introduce yourself?
My name is Pete Oiderma, the property owner of 300 Denora Boulevard, the subject in question. I was just handed this by the Director of Community Development. I have not had an opportunity to read it, so I can't refer to it. I don't know what's in it. I want to make this brief so I don't waste a lot of your time. So I prepared a statement, and I also have a couple of exhibits that are attached to it. They're not all complete. There's only the one copy of all color copies of all the pictures that I took. And there's other ones that are in black and white, which didn't come out real well because I was running out of ink. But anyway, let me begin. First, I would like to give you a brief history that what I've been going through the last November 2017. Shortly after Hurricane Irma, we decided to renovate our pool. The pool deck and the surface had been deteriorating over a period of time. To add to the problem, massive neighboring Cuban laurel, also known as a banyan tree, was impacting the integrity of the pool with its invading roots. We first sought to repair the pool, but after consulting with a pool builder, we were told that the repair would not be practical because of having to put in cold joints. That would not guarantee the repair. He suggested we replace the pool. We contacted the pool company, and they proceeded to apply for a permit, only to be rejected because the application did not include an engineered flood drainage plan, an additional $1,700 of cost to me. After several trips to Town Hall and virtually getting no help or guidance from planning and zoning as how to proceed, I wrote 2 letters, one dated December 26, 2017, the other one February 7th, 2018, to Town Council and the Town Manager concerning these issues. I never got a response for either of these letters. I continued visiting Town Hall with my issues, meeting with Building Department, explaining that my property already had proper drainage implemented by the way of French drains and drain pipes. Finally, someone suggested, why don't you apply for a waiver? So I applied. It was finally approved and signed by Director Green. It did not end here. After finally getting a permit number, not a permit, the permit application was rejected again, this time for too much impervious surface, exceeding 60% of the total area of the property. After a tedious weekend of measuring and calculations, I found the property did not exceed 60%. It only amounted to about 41%. I presented this to the director, who differed with me on this very strongly, but allowed me to proceed with the application. After another week or so of review, I received another notice of rejection, this time for the plan calling for the pool enclosure deck foundation encroaching the 5-foot setback from my property line by 3 feet. When I discussed this with the director and brought up the appliance of a variance, he said I shouldn't bother, that he would recommend against it and would not likely be approved by the council. He basically said the same thing, applying to vacate to acquire the sliver land between my pool and the seawall. I was finally able to get a meeting with the mayor, town manager, and the director, and the town attorney to address this issue. The outcome of the meeting was that I should go ahead and apply for the vacation of this sliver of land. They almost all agreed that this was my best avenue. Now, why should I, the property owner, acquire and own this land? Please look at Exhibit A, which is the survey with the measurements that are pretty detailed on the back of the property. All these measurements are from the seawall. As you see that little yellow mark, that area, that was the piece of property that I wanted to extend my pool deck to. My pool deck presently is 26 feet from the seawall. After I get my 36 inches, it would only be 23 feet. But it exceeds the area past the property line. This is quite a big chunk of land we're talking about here. Okay. So to go on, all this land is approximately about 817 square feet and is owned by the town of Fort Myers Beach. The town doesn't maintain it. It does not control or mitigate any of the erosion that occurs or any damage that occurs to the seawall. That is, that they don't take a responsibility for. They certainly are not a steward of that property and piece of land. Who assumes that responsibility? A responsible property owner. That would be me. My question to you is, if you so adamantly want to maintain ownership of this property, what credible use of this insignificant piece of land would benefit the town of Fort Myers Beach, other than just having control over it? I have no intentions of extending my house to within 25 feet of the seawall. Even if I did, the town does have the final say on what I can build on the property. All I want to do is have a nice pool and a larger pool enclosure, 3 feet wider, which does not impede or cause any harm to my neighbors. On Exhibit P, please look at the photos. Those are photos of about, I'd say, 1/3 to 25% of the pools on my canal. They are all within about 5 or 6 feet of the seawall. And that's why I bring this thing up. It doesn't look like it maybe from a photo, but I'd gladly take you on a boat down my canal and show you all these homes. Many of these pools have already been, I think maybe 3 have already been built this year on that property. And if you look at some of those carefully, some of those pool decks extend to the seawall. Why my property is an odd shape. Okay. Also on Exhibit PPA, this is the Lee County Property Appraiser Spectrometry Aerial Reviewer. Some people say that this is not exactly, accurate, but the way you can do it on the website is you can go to a directly overhead picture, And if you compare that picture with the survey, you can see it's pretty accurate. So, most of these houses, I would say, are in nonconformity, or I say noncompliance with the existing codes. The other thing is, I don't know when and who drew up these property lines. If you notice, all the properties are basically in rectangles, and that's if you're on a straight street. I'm on a pie. What they've done is excluded 800 square feet, a whole big swath of land behind my house that is unusable by the owner. If you look at that little yellow line on some of those drawings is hard to see, but if you look at it, some of those go through some of the houses, some go through the property line, but mine takes away a whole big piece of land. Everybody else almost owns all the land to the seawalls. So I don't see what use it is, to the Fort Myers Beach owning it. Like I say, I maintain it, and I wish that, you would decide on approving the vacation of this land. The last statement here is when I talked to the surveyor through my properties, they did in Cape Coral, the city ceded that property from the property line to the canal because they didn't want to have any potential legal issues with it. So that's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Adorno. Let's see if there's any questions from the applicant.
How long have you owned the property, sir?
2001.
2001, okay.
Can I
Questions?
answer any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Not at the
Perhaps
moment.
there will be others,
Yeah.
yes.
I kind of want to hear from the town.
Okay,
before I
yep.
Go back to him.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adorno. Jason?
Good morning. Yes,
Jason, before we begin,
I'm here.
could
Not
you,
here.
did the house sell, Dan? Sorry.
I won.
Jason, could you please, just for the record, make sure we did advertise this as a regular public hearing rather than just a workshop?
Yes, sir. So this case and all the vacates that are in front of you today were advertised twice, within the guidelines that are provided by the Land Development Code. Just so you know the difference, our Land Development Code requires these to come to you, to the LPA. Statute doesn't require it necessarily to go to the LPA, so we have an extra layer of advertising that occurs. So it was twice, once outside of 15 days, and then once within that 15 days prior to the meeting. So each of these items were advertised 2 times.
Earlier last week, it seemed as though we were still just having a workshop, and so
And that's my fault for not explaining that enough to you guys. Is what happened is when we got, because of the schedule of the advertising for the newspaper, we ended up having to put these on the 21st, and we had already scheduled the 21st as a workshop by that time. So it happened to be, instead of holding any of these up for another month, I decided to just work it in with the workshop schedule. So we figured we would rather move forward than delay any longer.
we're at your service, Jason.
I appreciate that, and I do appreciate your patience with that. Vacate 180001, as the applicant had mentioned. I'm not going to address there's some inaccuracies in some of the statements that he made related to other items, but I want to focus on what the issue is here today, rather than those other items. We have worked with him to get the application in place. There was an explanation of the challenges that go with variances. As we all know, there's a high bar. Also vacates. There hasn't been many in the town. And essentially what we explained is the comprehensive plan essentially says discourages any vacation right away unless there's a greater public good for that. And so trying to explain that's the hurdle, that's the bar that you have to achieve. Please take that into consideration, but we'll help you through the process, is essentially the conversation. So the concern, this staff report represents the input as is required by the LDC from other staff, the attorneys, Public Works, and any other utility that may be in the area. After review of this, the concern is that the amount of space that's being requested to vacate, the applicant is correct, I believe there's anywhere from 15 to 18 feet. And the chunk of land, it's approximately, I think per their survey, was 817 square feet, if I'm not mistaken. It's on a corner of the canal where it kind of bends. And so the concern is the amount of area that it would have an impact on the entire canal. There is a canal-wide slight issue. There, I think he mentioned some other homes encroach. It seems like this canal was built not quite right to the property lines of the way it was platted, but those other lots are 2 to 4 to 5 feet that we're seeing, not 15 and 18 feet. We don't have a reason why this one is encroaching so much. However, part of the concern from Public Works side and the other departments were navigation waterway, the width, you really narrow it and pinch point here. And I'll remember when we measure dock widths and what you're allowed per lot on a percentage basis. So there's an opportunity where by default, unfortunately, if you vacate this much, you can create a non-conforming situation across the canal for a neighbor, because at that point it's less than 75 feet. They may have used 25% of that 75 feet. So those are the main issues, just concern over losing the opportunity to, whether it's take other action to correct the issues that have been with this canal, which again, I don't think anybody's created. There's no harm. Obviously, the applicant didn't create this. We don't believe that he filled it in. It looks like these canals have been kind of this situation for a while, but we think that's a better way to go about this than giving up the right-of-way for the canal. And that's why we're just recommending to you that it's not a good opportunity for this. However, it's up to the public hearing process.
Questions for staff?
Yes.
Megan?
Are we going for a vacate and not a setback variance? We give them all the time. I mean, we
Right.
do for special circumstances when it's an odd-shaped lot, which this clearly is an odd-shaped lot. It feels like that this is the harder of the two to go through. If he's got an odd-shaped lot, and we have stated on this, if you have an odd-shaped lot, there's a good chance you could get your setbacks. And then this
Right.
doesn't,
Well,
then we're not talking about.
If I could comment on that, if there appears to be no valid function of the property though by the town, and to take it off of the and put it on the taxable payrolls would be a positive for the town, as distinguished from just granting a setback variation.
Can we do something with the canal piece where he can't build too far into the canal, which is your biggest concern?
Yes, I mean, I think the way that's, essentially we have the power to recommend anything from no to yes to somewhere in between, right?
Or
So
some
whether
condition?
whether it's 5 feet of it or half of it or other portions. I agree. I think the variance probably, again, the bar to getting a variance is always challenging, but this is permanent, right? A variance is a little bit more.
Excuse me, can I get
Would you let-
interject here?
Please wait and save your questions just for a little while. Thank you.
The variance can be structure specific. I mean, there's other conditions that can be put on it. Once you vacate the right of way, it's a permanent thing.
Yeah, right.
That's the
Well,
concern.
and
so.
that's what I'm getting at. This is a very extreme, and I understand putting it back on the tax, and he's responsible for that property and to maintain it and the seawall. So I'm kind of the idea that, there is some point to this. But I'm also looking at this going, this seems like the harder of the two ways to go. But this is where we are here.
And we don't dictate to them which application they submit. So
But it sounded like there was a recommendation made to him, either or he's going to follow the recommendation. He's a resident. We do our best to understand the government, but even being part of it, you still sometimes struggle through it. I had one more question, and it has kind of left me.
Okay, well,
So
we'll
let's go
come
on to
back.
her.
Thanks, Megan. Jane?
Okay, this happened to me, and it will happen to a whole bunch more people because it goes up and down all of those fingers that are Denora, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Connecticut. It's in that whole platted neighborhood, and it extends to every single one of the properties. I bought a house on Madison. I put in a pool, a dock, a lift, and a fence, got permits for all of them. They all crossed that 10-foot piece of property that went the entire width of my backyard to the waterway. I maintained it. I maintained the seawall. I maintained all of it. They gave me the permits, which if it wasn't mine, they shouldn't have. And then I sold the property, gave her my survey that I purchased at the time I purchased, and she went in to do an adjustment on the cage, and they told her that she had to vacate the back property, and she sued me. So I offered to, I said, I don't know how I got everything done with the same survey, but I offered to vacate it for her, and she was mad enough that she just wanted to sue me. So I even came into the town, and the town was willing to vacate the entire street with one application because it was going to happen to everybody because everybody else had docks. So everybody on that canal is in the same situation and can be sued for it, although they did drop it. She then did try to go after my license, so it tied me up for 2 years, which they told me that it wasn't going to be an issue. But the point is, this can impair your entire life. And why is the town holding on to property that we can't do anything with? We have to cross their property to get to it. We're not maintaining it. We're not doing anything. If we own all those seawalls, then we probably should pay for them. That would be a stupid thing to keep.
Follow up on that is, can you give us a little history as to what happened there?
As far as this property,
Yeah.
And why, was the seawall put in afterwards?
it looks like the seawall's been there for many years.
When they
I
put in
went
the
back as far as I
seawalls-
could on Lee County's aerials, and so I think it's been there for 30-plus years.
How I was explained to it on my property was when they used to be all natural properties, so they came in and made it easy, put the seawalls in, then brought the land into it.
So the seawall was the reason for maintaining that one sliver, is that correct?
Well, the seawall was put in after the lots were plotted.
Right.
So then they put in the seawall. Well, they weren't going to excavate everything back to make a straight line. They made it as easy as possible, so they put the straight line in, and then they brought the land in and filled it in, which made a parcel that did not belong to them the owners of the property.
There's,
Well,
so,
is that the case here on this street, if I may ask that? Are there other properties adjacent, contiguous to this that are similar and have the similar situation where the lot line is not the same as the seawall?
Consistent with the
sure, if you
seawall.
look at packet page 21, which the applicant has provided, and that's their description of what would be, if approved, that's kind of the quitclaim exhibit. It shows, you can somewhat see how, I would say yes, except this property specifically is an anomaly even amongst this strange
area.
anomaly. You can see where his description, where at the corners of his, like, I think it's L1 and L4, those sides, it comes back. And so there's, the properties adjacent to him down the canal appear to be anywhere from, like I said, I think it's 2 to 4 to 5 feet. He's 16 and 18 feet out. So that's the difference, is that you do have quite a substantial issue. I think the staff's point was there's a better way to deal with this than just start vacating one property and then you have this narrowing, and then what do we do with it? What is the long-term implications of that? Is there a bigger picture to go for this whole canal and look at replatting it or vacating portions? Perhaps. But the concern was the amount of land that's vacated on this is what's troubling. And it's quite a narrow section that you
And
end up
when the
going through.
town continued to own that property, were there access points given? In other words,
So they've gotten, he has received dock permits in the past, the applicant themselves. So there's nothing that's prohibited them from receiving other permits along
Mr.
the
Chairman,
canal.
I have a question on that. It may not be relevant to this, but I notice, that there's a covered boat lift. And the covered boat lift extends quite a way into the canal, which exacerbates the navigational hazard situation. But the covered boat lift is clearly non-conforming because it goes to the lot line. And our land development code does not allow a covered boat lift that goes to the lot line absent of variation. But I mean that.
I cannot confirm.
I'm not using that as
I know.
a way to deny this application, but I'm just commenting on the fact that there seems to be, in light of the applicant's testimony, and in light of what we're looking at, a lot of past violations of our land development. Now, maybe they're grandfathered, maybe they're ancient, but I don't know. But
Well, I did look at this one, and
Yeah.
they were permitted, and the design met the standards. There was a setback from that line that you're referring to. Unfortunately, you're correct in that the way the survey shows, it does not appear that it was built that way.
yeah, there has to be a setback from the side yard line extending out into the waterway.
So the
So-
permit that was used to build this was not what was built, is that correct?
I feel comfortable saying that, yes.
When was it, do we know, when was that, when, Miss,
I'm wondering how anybody gets around that boat.
when was the,
When was that built?
when was
The
that
boat
I
built?
believe it was 1999, and that is only 25%, covers 25% of the waterway. And that, which
Okay,
is
but this was
supposed to be
with regard
allowable.
to
It was
the-
approved by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, okay, well,
Yeah, but the code violation is that it goes right up to the
lot line.
side lot line, you know, and that,
Yeah.
you know, I tried to build, I had to move mine 20 feet. There's 20 feet or something like that,
Okay,
yeah.
So what will happen is, and by default is, again, you narrow, we do percentages. So you narrow a canal, and then you have created potentially either for himself also, or the neighbors, you've created a non-conforming structure of their own, where maybe they were in compliance today, the vacate goes away, 25% of a smaller number
understood.
is a
Yeah.
smaller number, so.
Dan?
So just to come full circle here, this whole process started because of a swimming pool, right? There's a
Yes.
swimming pool there now. That can't be replaced as is?
Well, there's also an expansion request. I mean, there is a combination of things.
I understand the
Um,
request.
And the
I'm
original
just-
discussion was the neighbors have all of these pools that are closer and adjacent to their seawalls, which this neighborhood does have quite a few pools and houses that were built pre-town and that sort of thing that had different setbacks, I guess. I don't know how to explain, or they were measuring from the seawall and nobody realized. I don't know. I can't explain that. That wasn't part of our review. But yes, what triggered it was replacing the pool, ending up expanding things, expanding the screen structure, and then that it didn't meet the setbacks for all that. So then we started going down this road.
My question, though, could the pool as it now exists just be replaced as it is?
I don't know off the top of my head if the existing wall of the pool is 5 feet or more from the property line. From the survey, it potentially could be from the existing. I don't recall. Maybe the applicant remembers or not, but I don't recall.
That was permitted at that time, right?
Right.
So there must be some.
So you could do repair and maintenance. Part of the issue that we have is that our land development code does not have an allowance for non-conforming structures to be long-term maintained. Basically, it addresses them as non-conforming, and if you want to come back for decks, for example, or a similar thing, structurally, if you want to replace that, you have to either get a variance or meet the setback. The goal is to go away at some point in this non-conformity or to correct it.
Jane?
Well, in my opinion, I think it would behoove the town to vacate any property that doesn't have a use for the town, that we would have to cross private property to get to, and we couldn't do anything with it anyway, to the owner of that property, because I think there would be a great case for the town wouldn't release it to me, so my seawall fell in, but they won't fix my seawall, but it's on their land, and it's eroding my property. I think it would be just like Cape Coral did, vacate them all. Give them to the people that are there unless you need that easement, unless you have access for a utility or reason. It doesn't make any sense for the town to own it, because it does make you liable.
Thanks, Jane. Other questions for staff?
I have a question. Dan, Jason, if you would just elaborate on your conclusion here. No public purpose, I understand that, but do you think realistically that if this is denied, that suddenly people are going to tear down seawalls and widen the canals? No one individual person could accomplish that unless it's done on a whole canal-wide basis.
And I think that's mostly the point, is that
Yeah.
I think there's other ways as a community, as a neighborhood to address some of these issues than just piecemealing. You're going to have another one. There's a guy down the street that's going to come in and ask for a vacate of. So this ball is rolling in that direction, and I think our opinion is there's a better way to do this and make an establishment of, let's reestablish where these lines are. And in addition to that, you have this extreme case where it's a much bigger chunk of land. So that's the conclusion, essentially, is that there isn't a public purpose, a greater public benefit to this, because that canal and navigation is part of our job to make sure we ensure that it's safe. That is public right-of-way, and we can access technically this area through boat, but we were concerned about the amount of land. Now, if there's an in-between, that's obviously a discussion point. That doesn't fix the physical structure, I get that. That seawall is there. But just like driveways, just like culverts, that's the responsibility of the individual property owners. Maintenance of your right-of-way up to the edge of the road, your swales, that's your responsibility. Even though that's public right-of-way, you maintain that. So this is the same way when you have that gap between a property line and a seawall.
What is
All
your,
public right away, though?
excuse me?
It's public right-of-way. It is dedicated as public waterway right-of-way,
Finish,
yes.
Dan, sure.
I'd like to finish with Jason here. What, would you clarify then, you're saying there's a better way, and what is, would you describe to us what you would suggest in lieu of, to ameliorate this situation?
I think the canal as a whole needs to be looked at. I think there needs to be, as far as a neighborhood meeting, there needs to be discussion with everybody that owns property there. We need to figure out the best course of action for everybody. Or you do nothing and wait till the seawalls fail, and then when they go back to put them back in, they've got to cut back. Or we deal with this today and just deal with this one. But I'm more of the side of let's try to figure out what to do for the entire canal, because we do admit and agree that there's some encroachments along the entire thing.
But are there, going back to my question a while back, are there properties owned by the town all along that canal?
The canal seawalls, and just, again, I'm speaking in general, not for every property, but there's seems to be 3 to 4 feet, maybe up to 5 feet of the seawalls are canal side of the property line. So just like this, they're encroaching into the right-of-way. However, it's much smaller amounts from aerials and from research and from the plats that I've looked at than this one. This one just happens to be, for whatever reason, 13 to 18 feet
Yeah.
in width.
But this seawall is in line with the adjacent properties, though.
No, it's not. If you look at, if
It's
you look
at the
at,
corner.
it's at a corner, but there's also, if, again, I point you to
It has to be
page
at a corner. Something about
packet,
it has
did I
to
say
show.
25 maybe before? The quick claim exhibit. You can see where his corners shoot back towards the individual properties where everybody else is 3 or 4 feet off. If you look at the covered boat lift that you pointed out,
Yeah.
you can see the sharp, and that's what it is on the other side too. It doesn't show it completely, but the other side of the adjacent neighbor comes back about 7 or 8 feet or more, and then the seawalls pick up.
Did we do that seawall?
I don't know. I
You
don't
don't know.
think so. I don't know if we've done any seawalls along this corridor.
Well,
Generally,
when-
it's private.
So this is a much bigger issue, but this gentleman right here wants a pool. So I don't think we should hold him up for a much big picture. Isn't there a way we can just grant the gentleman a variance to get this pool done and handle this issue down the road?
In my opinion, if you're giving out permits that cross this land and then stopping them later, this needs to be fixed in this entire neighborhood, and that is from Denora down to Connecticut, and it is on every single property. And I mean, we have brought it up. I brought it up myself and tried to do it all by myself, but I couldn't get it done. I could have done my whole street, but they preferred to sue me instead. So the point is, it's ridiculous for everybody to have to come in here and pay $1,000 or whatever it is to come in and say, may I have this 2 feet vacated that I'm already using, that I've already got permits on, that I've already put a dock on, what I've already put a fence to, that I'm maintaining, and there's no access for you to come across it unless you come across my property to be a part of my land. This is ridiculous. It is a real problem. And the people, I don't know, in here it says something about 25-foot setback. That's only for structures. It's a 5-foot setback for your seawall, for your cage or your pool, or you can build your pool to the 5-foot setback of a seawall if you don't have a cage. And so that's why some of the pools are closer, because they didn't have a cage. And so, I just think it's ridiculous that we are holding on to this land that I think ultimately we could be responsible for a lot of things. If there's all those homeowners in there and we had a really bad storm, took out all those things, I guarantee they'd get together and sue this town. You own the property. you know, you wouldn't let us vacate it and own it, so
Can you tell us are there any other examples of this where we have dealt with this public purpose issue on this kind of question?
they vacated my property.
And I was going to ask you, was that, I've come across several times the
310
past years where
Madison
there's
Court.
roadways, I think, is it there's one road here in town, I can't remember the name of it, but they had like a roadway platted between the canal and the lot.
That's on Denora, and that's also on Estero Boulevard.
And that was right-of-way, not canal, but I didn't see any canal. I didn't come across any canal vacates, only right-of-way vacates. But it's the same question. It's the public purpose.
You can pull
question.
my property, it was vacated.
It was canal area was vacated? Okay, I can check that. But again, this is the same question about public purpose. And since I've been here, everybody said, no, we can't vacate rights away. But obviously, we're dealing with several today. It all depends on the context and the individual,
Okay.
case by case.
But it does seem to me that this is an opportunity to fix this in a bigger picture sense, like Jane was saying, and look at all those properties. And it may also create an opportunity, if we do it that way, to, I mean, if you look at this particular seawall, it looks like I don't know, it's out into the canal a bit on both sides of it. And, you know, depending on how that property line was drawn, when that seawall had to be replaced, that could be returned to a contiguous
Well,
seawall.
I'll tell you how that happens, is that when a seawall fails and they put in a vinyl seawall, they come in and they put the sleeves right down your seawall line, and then they, you know, pour the cement from there, and then they put a new cap on. But that's, if you will look also at the surveys, typically the property line does go out into the water.
You're correct. What I've seen all of Southwest Florida is over time, you get this incremental slight encroachment, but it's 12 inches at a time, not when you go through life cycles of the seawalls, not 18 feet. That's
And
the biggest.
Denora had a lot of seawalls that went with Hurricane Charley. Do you know how old your seawall is? Okay.
What's the unintended consequences to this change? I mean, are we talking about we're going to make a whole lot of docks non-conforming and that they're going?
Yes. Every single one.
So when one of these docks goes down, we're going to have 25 people in front of us asking for variances on their permits if we make this change and their dock was destroyed, and, you know, or they get a bigger boat and want a bigger dock, and we're going to have, I'm just looking at this long-term and bigger picture of just a simple change is not a simple change. And there's always unintended consequences that we need to kind of consider here, or else we could be creating a bigger can of worms someplace else down the line.
Well, I don't think that anybody can come in and get a seawall permit to add another 5 feet out into the riparian rights without being said no to. But I do think that it is important to realize that that entire neighborhood, like I said, all along Shell Mound, on all of the fingers from Denora to Connecticut, and I don't know if there's other streets, but I would imagine so, have at least 1 to 10 feet all on every single one of them.
What we're saying in this case, though, is we're making the canal smaller, that 25%
No,
of
it's already
channel.
there. We're not
already
going to
there.
let it, you know,
We're
we're not letting it,
what
not
he's
expanding the
proposing.
edge of the seawall. We're allowing him to take the land from
Yes.
from the seawall to his property.
But technically, we are kind of encroaching on that canal, the true canal space, and workable now if something happens that, again, seawalls go down, they now own up to the edge. We have no recourse as to how to repair and maintain it, at least at the same, if not bigger, if need be, because this already is a narrow canal.
I think we could make a notation that the seawall would be the end of those rights in vacating anything to the seawall, period.
Yeah, that's true. We could do
And
that.
that would make it simple, and then we won't have to hear, I mean, it's amazing, every single person has a seawall, and most every single person on all of those streets has a dock. And they've all been granted permits illegally, per se, as of today,
I'm sorry, I don't,
How do-
why were they, you can get a dock in the canal. He has a permit for docks. That doesn't,
I
it's
know,
not
I
something
know,
that we were,
we all were given,
it's not something we shouldn't have granted. He has a right to get a
Well,
dock. It's
I
the
was-
question where it's measured from and what the
I
width of
was
his property
granted a
is.
pool and a fence that went right across this 10-foot, because I didn't have a cover over my pool. My pool started at 5 feet. So 5 feet of my pool and my fence and my, over here was all granted permits with the town, and then I sold them, and then I was sued for it.
Well, in this case, I think that the permits were not wrongly given, that they were reviewed and met the code, and he was given permits for certain things, regardless of what's built. Let's not have that conversation right now, but it doesn't prohibit him from getting a future permit for the canal. The difference would be he's actually, is the unintended consequences is how does all that math work out for everybody else? What does maintenance of the canal end up doing when you're dredging and you've got, I mean, if you're asking about a middle ground, maybe it is up to the amount that's equal to what the other seawalls are. That's a potential middle ground. But
Well, for what it's worth, Mr. Chairman, I owned 2 lots on that street at one time. The last 2 lots before the canal
One
turns.
time or still?
One time,
Okay.
years ago. And I put 250 feet of seawall on that very same canal. And to my knowledge, it was on the lot line. So I'm not sure that there is a problem all along that canal.
Look
because
at the picture.
When that canal makes a right-hand turn, those are the lots I owned on the corner, on that corner.
from my research, that canal going out looks like it's all pretty straight line
Yeah.
along it. It's this finger along the
Well,
backside of
my
Denora.
lots came in the finger.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's.
came
it's
in the
as you-
finger. The
yep.
first 2 lots, it came in the finger. Yeah.
Okay. Dan, did you have any other questions?
I'm good.
You good? Mr. Adorno, I interrupted you. Did you want to comment on what staff has just said?
I just received this, the conclusion on here. It says, like Mr. Hughes said earlier, he didn't quite understand the reduction in the navigable waterway part. It's already narrowed by the encroachment of the applicant's seawall in previously filled land. Well, it just happens that that canal right there is the widest part of that whole canal. So I didn't make it any smaller, or nobody else did, unless they did this when they built these seawalls. And I don't know why they filled it in. I mean, that apparently that should have been governed by codes long before you guys. So that didn't happen, and it will and it says will permanently create a waterway with irregular width, cause potential navigation. There's no irregular width there. The only thing irregular is when you're coming down the canal, you take a slight left because it's a dog leg. If you look down there, it goes like this. It's like an 80-degree angle or something like that. There's no, a reduction in waterway or navigational area. I don't know what you're talking about.
Mr. Odierno, just for the record, under oath, could you, you did not put in that seawall
I did not put in that seawall.
and that jog or whatever,
No.
but you did put in the boat cover that encroaches. Is that
I
correct?
put the boat cover in over an existing boat lift, yes.
But it extends into there, into the,
Well, yes, it's in that 25% that's allowed in building the dock.
Up into the-
And I do have, I have copies, I believe, of that when that permit was issued. I think it was in 1999 by the previous owner. I didn't do it.
and your existing pool is how big in terms of size?
I'm looking to put in like,
No, not what you're looking to
I
put in.
know, but
what-
this is basically the same size. It's 12 by 26, 24, 12 by 24, maybe.
So
I don't have my plans
You
with
are
me.
not expanding the pool.
Not
This is-
making it bigger, no, I'm just.
You were
well,
expanding
actually,
the
I'm-
screen, is that correct?
Well, I wanted to add 3 feet to my patio.
deck.
Pool deck,
Okay.
because when I'm renovating the pool, I'm going to put in a spa, which is going to take up a couple extra feet, so I
See,
need
so
to be
that's the
able to walk
That's the
around.
reason is you want to do a spa and therefore it expands the deck.
Right,
Is
I
that
mean, I
correct?
can go replace it the same way now, but I only have like close to 3 feet of walkway on one side, so if you put a pool cover on, you have to drag that thing in there, you know, you always have a chance of
I
falling
understand.
into the
I
pool.
just wanted to see, you know, where the shoe was pinching, that's all.
Yeah, and the pool, and the house is, the pool is parallel to the house, but the house also sits at an angle.
Megan?
More for you. Is it better to just give him the 3 feet variance setback, let him build his pool and handle this globally? And then look at it as the whole street, look at it as you know, because it seems like this is going to be a bigger issue that we're going to piecemeal. Give him the ability to make this pool, get this pool, and then we handle this globally. I
But,
know.
you know,
I'm
actu-
just
actually,
asking if
you
that's
know,
a possibility.
Can I interject again? Yeah, that would be fine, but originally, when I was trying to apply for a variance, I have all the I've got all the applications for a variance filled out. When I talked to the director, he said, forget it, because I'm against it, and we're not giving it to you. That's exactly what he said. And he also told me over the phone that he was against this particular thing.
But this is now becoming a big can of worms that we're trying to fit in 20 minutes and figure out if we're
But I
going to
need
fix
to leave
something in
too. I don't.
Jason,
and I'm just wondering.
did you give that advice about?
No, anytime we meet, so I would never give somebody advice.
I
We
didn't
we
think
explain the
so.
challenges, we
Then you
explain
call
the
me a liar.
difficulties. No,
Call
I
me
think
a
there's a
liar.
Mr.
mis-
Adorno, let him finish.
I think there's a misunderstanding of the term, and this happens a lot, so
Sure.
I understand. I understand somebody takes it that way. We simply talk about difficulties of the legal standards to meet for a variance. The de minimis conversations we have, all that neighborhood stuff, all that stuff. That's what we try to explain to people, is that they're difficult, but if you can make a good argument, and it's a good reason. That's all.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Megan's solution seems reasonable to me. Is there some objection to that, or?
Well, let's get, any further comment from public? No? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing part of this. Neighbors had all been notified, right, about this?
There's not a direct mailing for the vacates. There's the 2 advertisements that go in the paper.
See, so just the, so it's just the advertisement in the paper and no
Sure, right.
notice has really gone out yet.
Correct.
So Megan's sort of correct that we'll be seeing the floodgates open as soon as this gets done.
So we're
But
trying
if I
to,
could I address your
Yeah.
question, if I may? I think the challenge with this one is because it's so much, and so I don't know that the global thing was going to help everybody, except maybe perhaps this gentleman because of how much he has. So can the variance be done? Yes. We've talked about options of a reverter. When the seawall fails, then the right-of-way comes back. That gets muddy. But there's some options there, but frankly, yes, the variance is the
Same
cleanest
way a
thing.
utility access might be provided, as we've done it many times.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, Jane, well, let's
Before-
just formally, we'll close the public hearing part, and now we're into our
Wait,
discussion.
don't yet, because I
okay?
might need an answer from him.
Okay, well, you can ask him then,
Okay.
but that's,
Okay, the question I have is really 3 feet going to make it for whatever you're going to, whatever your plan is? Does 3 feet cover everything, including the pool enclosure and everything that is going to be done in putting this hot tub in and if you're putting back up a cage, because that footer has to be counted in there? 3 feet will do it. Because we don't want you to have to come back for another foot. Yes. I'm telling you, you
Okay,
don't
yeah,
want to play
yeah,
that game.
Because, the pool guy had drawn up several different proposals for me to be able to get it through the planning part of it. And I think we may have settled for 3 as the minimum, but I could.
My thought is if you were saying
We
that
actually
your
wanted,
pool-
actually, to be honest with you, 5.
I think you were saying that you would have only a 2-foot hot
Right.
tub. Well, you still have to have a walk-around around
Right.
that's required.
Correct.
So I would say that you really should have 5 feet.
Yeah.
not the 18.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. I really would prefer the vacate, and I think it's a right.
But we are up against what the language says about,
But I think
as
we ought
we
to,
have in many cases, the comp plan's clear about that, and that needs amendment. The comp plan should have been reviewed before this, but that's the way it is.
I'll settle for the variance, but I tell you, like she says, down the future, watch out.
Nope,
When
right.
something happens, I mean,
We understand, our terms are up, I think, in the next year. though.
In October.
For example, I have, during when you have a really heavy rainy season and the water comes up over the seawall, a lot of people have built their seawalls up to, and then filled in behind
Sure.
it because they didn't want the water encroaching property. Well, I have gotten like 2x12s, boards and logs floating onto my property. Now, if I went out there
I'll do the
and tried to pick one of these things up and wrench my back or fell and hurt myself, that wasn't on my property. Just let you know.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you, Mr. Adorno. Okay, further discussion, let's say,
I do think this is a problem. It needs to be looked at bigger picture and not in 48 minutes. But I don't want to stop him from getting his pool. I mean, for putting back what he wants with a little bit of extra, I don't see,
how do you feel about the, as Dan has raised, some compromise between the 18 feet and the 3 feet?
fine with that too.
You would?
I think it's the same situation. You're
Jane?
going to be getting permits that go to the fence, to the seawall. So you're once again creating a non-conforming issue.
If
I
we're-
think that it should just be to the seawall and end it.
I understand that, but the problem is, this is.
Well, not today,
Not
but-
just the one property, and it seems to me, by vacating the full thing, we would be encouraging somebody to come right in, because who doesn't want land?
Well, I
ta-
know,
I'll
but
take the
they're already
land, sure.
maintaining it and
But-
dealing with it. But I do think.
I think we're trying to address what is an obvious issue that he has, and it can be addressed more minimally without violating the plan, I think. That's my view. Dan?
I would have a hard time voting for a vacation just because of how explicit the comp plan is
Yeah.
with being careful about those. But this seems like a kind of a practical way to help these guys get their pool.
Would you
And
support a smaller, like the 3-foot?
yes,
You would?
I
Okay.
think so.
Scott?
I'm just for a variance for the pool. I think once we get into this vacating land, we're opening up a whole big can of worms.
So you would do.
Is that what you were asking me?
I was asking if you would support a motion that would give them 3 feet.
5 feet.
Oh,
5 feet.
5 feet.
5 feet.
oh, to vacate 5 feet, maybe?
No,
I'd
I don't
rather
wanna
give
va-
them-
no, no,
Okay,
I
just
don't
a
want to
variance.
vacate anything.
I'd rather give them a variance.
I'd rather give them a variance.
Whatever the feet is that we decide on.
I think if you start this vacating process, we're opening up a
Okay.
big can of worms.
And Dan?
Well, I think I agree with the consensus that we want to find a resolution to this. I suspect that if we decide that, look at the bigger picture and that entire street, we're going to still end up at some future date, it's going to be vacated. Because in my opinion, the hypothetical dream that the existing issues are correctable over the life of the structures and will be corrected is while hypothetically correct, is pragmatically impossible.
Yes, I'd say that's true.
And therefore, we can spend an awful lot of time on this. But what, in my view, if we review the entire thing, I think the result will be that the lands that are no longer utilized by the town for any purpose and have been part of these properties, will be vacated anyway.
I suspect you're right,
Yeah.
but that's a can of worms I think
Yes, it is.
we should open up. I mean,
I
at some
agree.
point, not today.
Okay,
but,
I'm just,
So-
all right, I agree with that, and so I
Jason?
would go along with the
Consensus?
idea of the
5-foot variation.
Yes, I
do
would.
If we were to vote to give them a variation, does that violate any of our notices provisions?
yeah, you'd
here?
have to.
Yeah, so why don't we do this? Make a vote today, take a vote on this issue, and obviously with your direction, it sounds like there's some agreement about you like the variance
We
option.
don't want to vacate.
What we'll do is I'll work with him to process that application, and frankly, because of the timing of vacates, because of the notice, it's got to go to council, they've got to set a hearing date, that date can't happen for at least 30 days after all that. The variance will probably catch up. So what we'll do is we'll run that concurrently, so then that way, frankly, he'll end up having two options. So the council will be able to vote ultimately on the vacate if they agree with you, or what I'm hearing, versus the variance, and they'll have those options in front of them.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is we.
You can't do it today, but we will,
Take a vote on turning down the vacation.
No.
whatever your
Oh,
request.
No,
not
no,
vote on it.
because then they can't, oh, yeah, they could.
This goes to
Okay.
the council no matter what. Whatever your recommendation is, it goes to the council. So,
And then recommend a variation be processed.
yes, sir, and we will help him get that caught up.
Okay, can we combine that in one motion?
Sure.
Any problem, Jack? Okay. Then,
I'll make a motion.
okay, Jane, I was gonna do it, but go ahead. I'll second yours.
Alrighty. I'll make a motion to deny the vacation at this time, but to open that door and looking at the entire neighborhood later, and to offer a 5-foot variance on the property at 300 Denora Boulevard. The length of the inside corridor of his land, is that how I should say it? Instead of,
Can I just, let's say
Property
the
line?
5 feet, my suggestion would be that it matches the seawall essentially, right? So we're going to be plus, let's just say plus or minus, and we'll
Yeah.
figure out what that exact number is.
okay, plus or minus 5 feet
Because each corner is going to be a little bit
along
different.
his back
To
property line.
approximate the seawall.
Okay,
Jane, I don't know if I like the language with regard to what you're proposing on, that we
I think we have to
consider
open
the,
that door.
that we consider the open door on that.
All right.
I would,
I do think that will
I
you
don't think we're
promise that
being
we will
asked
put
to
this
do that.
on to look at this? Because I think this is going to come back to us time over time over time now that, people will be discussing this because it'll be in the paper.
Yes, you've asked, and I've helped him fill out the other application. More than
Okay,
happy to help him.
May I also, before,
Okay.
isn't it enough just to say that we would recommend that the applicant come back to us with a variance request to allow him to make his pool improvements, rather than try to vote right now on how
Yeah.
big that should be? I mean, just leave it a little more
I would
open.
agree with that, Dan. So Jane, you're.
Doesn't that delay it another 2 months?
You can't give the variance, you can't give the recommendation variance today because
Okay.
of notice. But what you're saying, what I was taking as you're saying is the same thing, just worded differently.
I don't
is
wanna
We will
write
come
his
back to you with a
variance
variance with him.
Yes.
I will work with him to do that. And yes, your direction to me is work with him to bring it back.
Why don't we just continue to a date certain?
Because,
And it doesn't
It
get in.
won't go the time.
It doesn't go
Get in
anywhere.
the process.
Okay,
and
All
frankly,
right.
they're going to catch up to each other.
Yeah,
so-
they're gonna catch up.
okay, so
So
I-
you,
I recommend that we deny the vacation and offer a 5-foot variance setback from the property line, plus or minus.
I'll second that. Okay. Further discussion?
Yes. I think that might be a good solution, but keep in mind, when we're telling him he's going to come back for a variance, keep in mind the requirements of a variance, one of which is the property is unique and it's not anything else like it.
It
And then
is
we're
unique
saying that it's
because
the
it's a
same,
corner.
same thing on the whole street.
De
So-
minimis is the main.
It's got to be de minimis,
That's the,
Well,
de minimis.
Well, it is a corner lot.
Well,
on the
I go
canal.
back to, and I understand why Jason advised him not to seek a variance in the first place. And I think, I'm just saying, this is a good solution, I think, but I'm not sure that we have to do a little bending of something when it comes to granting the variance in terms of meeting the criteria.
Okay. No, I think, yeah, that's a good point. Okay?
I've seen you
Further
bend
discussion?
before.
Yes.
Okay.
But most of the bending isn't ours. Most of the bending happens in another
We've
another venue.
In another venue is right. We have a motion, I seconded it. Let's vote on it. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? No. Okay, so we passed that one, all right?
So with this one, just so the applicant also understands that we will take it to the council on the first available meeting. We have to advertise again 2 weeks out, and then they will set a date at that meeting, and then we'll advertise that, and that'll be at least 30 days from that day. So
Okay.
you're probably talking about 8 weeks
Okay.
before it gets on. So that's
Why does it have to go to the council?
Whenever we can advertise for the next meeting, for them to then have a meeting to set the date. That's the way the Florida statutes reads. So
Well, the council could still agree to vacate the property. I mean, we're
That's
just
true, too.
No,
making a
I
recommendation.
mean to hold the public, all right,
Let me give you an example.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Giordano.
Are you guys going to need those documents? Because if I go in front of council, I don't want particularly want to
Oh,
have
sure,
to
you can have them
duplicate
back.
those. Is there any problem with that? Well, I appreciate your, spending so much time on discussing this. And, like I said, I started this thing last November. I guess it's going to be 2019 before I get my permit for the pool.
So
Especially the
just to give you guys an idea of how long the vacate, September 10th may
keep
be a
in my
date that
letter.
we can make for the first meeting, but then the council has to set the future date.
Okay.
And that could be, but that date has to be at least 30
I
days.
got this kind of messed up. See if that's what you gave me. Yeah,
Okay, thank you very much.
sure something came off of that.
I got notes on this.
Second public hearing.
Thank you.
No problem. Take me out there. Boom.
Are we doing both of those, Jason, the 002 and 003?
Yes, so you're going to
Or
do
004?
2 and 3 are street vacates, right-of-way vacations,
And-
similar to what you just talked about, and then 4 and 5 are the plat.
We're going to do that all together?
We can take, I was planning
We'll
on,
have to make motions individually.
Make
but
individual
We're
motions.
going to, obviously, it's the same cast on both sides.
sure,
so
I'm going to
great.
probably ask you to do the street vacates separately, and then we
Okay.
can kind of take separate motions, but blend the plat vacates, because it's really part of the same block area, so.
Okay, so we got the vacating 180002, number 1, okay? John, you have the floor.
John Gucciardo for the applicant, and yes, we will try to keep this brief and consolidate the actions that you take. This is obviously a result of the approvals that were given by the town council for the TPI Margaritaville Resort. Those approvals from the hearings that happened in April and May were codified in ordinance 18-04. And in 18-04, beyond the deviations, it also listed a number of conditions. Conditions 9, 11, and 13 spoke specifically about the requirement to come back and replat some of the lands involved, and also to vacate some public right-of-ways and easements, and to replat and add in additional rights-of-way. I think that the packet that has been delivered to you by a combination of our staff and town staff does a very good job of pointing out the differences between these 4 different actions. We were not prepared or planning on making a full presentation about that. I think it pretty much speaks to itself, although we do have representatives from Morris Depew and Russell Sharp, our legal representative, here if there are any specific questions. But given that, we would just soon turn it over to Jason to walk you through the specifics of each of these actions.
Thanks, John. I'm sure there'll be questions. Thank you. Jason?
Yes, sir. The attorney just handed me the copies of the advertisements. There's a question about that. These hearings have been advertised twice for each case, one outside of the 15 days and then the other within the 15 days for this meeting. The advertisement was put in place, just as part of this record, it was put in place for these vacates prior to legal action that's supposedly been filed. We have not received that, I forget what the term is, but we have not been served that lawsuit. It is entirely within your purview whether you want to continue, whether you want to hear this.
We want to hear this.
I understood. I'm just putting on the record that all of that was put in motion prior to that, and that it's up to you, obviously, to choose. And again, because of this process, then the council will decide at what dates and when they want to hear that and all that, following that up. One change or correction that I wanted to make is in the staff report, I inexplicably referenced CPD 2017-0002. As the applicant has mentioned, the referencing an ordinance 18-004 is probably is a better reference to that. So I just want to correct that because that'll also be part of the condition. So for 18-0002, vacate the application of portions of Canal Street. This was discussed and described as part of the ordinance and the master concept plan. Specifically, this part will allow them to combine and kill their properties that are on both sides. As the master concept plan included, it was part of their pool area and all that outdoor area. So this will allow them to combine all that. And in exchange, as part of that, one of the conditions was they offered to the eastern portion of this is the town will then receive a wider and more easily managed, maintained, and better pedestrian vehicle access to the beach in exchange for that. So that is the basis of the greater public good that we described and the public benefit. And then there's the conditions that are included here, the 3 conditions. If you have any questions about those, I'd be happy
Okay,
to answer.
thank you very much. Questions for people? No? No? Okay,
This is the portion that gives it, that we're moving Canal Street, getting those new parking spaces.
And what about,
wait a second. Let's let Megan
Oh, I'm
finish.
good. I just want to,
If I may, technically, both
Yeah.
is a combined, actually, the offered right-of-way is bigger than both combined, but I'll discuss that again on the next one.
I just wanted to make sure we
Yes, ma'am.
reiterate the public benefit in there.
and we've moved the beach access to a different location, but it will still be within that.
Yeah, so what happens is, if you remember Canal Street, you've kind of got like a Y, T, or T, and what'll happen is it just moves to the east a little bit more. It's more of a north-south, and it does tie back into the exact near the same location. So once you get
But there
through
will
the
be a
new,
beach access there.
there'll be the beach
That's what I
access, there'll be a wider beach access down to the existing right-of-way, and then it'll be the same as was before that.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, sir.
Jason, isn't this in fact, there's no change here from what we reviewed when we approved the
Correct.
the LPA, and we had an extensive discussion at that time regarding these easements and the relocation and so forth, and the vacation and the new easement, so.
This request is consistent with what the council approved of conditions and the master concept plan of rezoning.
And which we,
Could you put that on the record, Dan and
Yes.
Jason? Thank you. Yep. Okay. Any other questions for Jason? No?
On the record that this is, in my opinion, public benefit.
Okay. Public comment? Yes, sir.
Didn't see anybody back there.
Leon Moyer, I need to be sworn. I didn't expect to be speaking, but I changed my
Raise
mind.
your right hand, Leon. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do affirm that, yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
council members, staff visitors, Leon Moyer. Want to start out by mentioning that I'm on the internet here, so I'm going to talk about packet part pages, which you might not have, but I'll try to give page numbers also of this application. Starting with the blue sheet or the town's first page here, it says, this is an item to vacate a portion of the right-of-way known as Canal Street, south of Astoria Boulevard. I believe there are 4 parcels included in this vacation today. Is that correct? Or
Well,
there are 3 other small parcels adjacent to Canal Street that are included in the diagrams later on. I'll continue, maybe we'll get to that exact page here. Is Tom Torgerson the owner? On page 1 and 2 of this application, he signed it as owner of Canal Street. I don't think he owns Canal Street yet. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Just want to bring that to your attention. The vacation application is dated June 29th. This has been in the works for quite a while. I have a request in to Mr. Green here to be notified of any pending vacations. I was never notified. So I don't know if that's necessarily a total impediment to the passage of this today. I want you to take notice that they're required to give notice, I think, to the people within the adjacent landowners and within 500 feet. I don't know that you certified that was being done. Also, there are water lines and utilities under Canal Street. I would like you to have a little bit of discussion about that, see if they're going to be properly preserved and that you'll still have total access to them. Has everyone signed off on this? The gas company, the water?
Mr. Moyer, if you have seen our packet, they
Yeah.
have received, there's recommendations from all of those folks, and we also have as one of the conditions of the vacation that the owner of the property will vacate and remove utilities underground, their responsibility.
That is a very good point, Mr. Chairman. Since when do we trust our public utilities to private individuals? Sure, they're good, they intend to do well, but that is an improper role of the town to be doing
Mr. Moyer,
that.
we don't often vacate streets.
I know, it's something new and it should be considered seriously and.
We are.
Okay, because I think your recommendations to council should be that council should either hire somebody or have their own staff take care of all the utilities there, particularly the water, sewer, and maybe that is Lee County's duty also. So, and you can't tell Lee County what to do necessarily. But those are issues I wish you would consider today before simply saying you think this isn't a public benefit, because it may not be a public benefit if your water pipes are torn up and you get polluted water during the construction process of reconnecting them.
Okay.
Okay, those types of issues are important. You did mention the legal actions. There are two of them. And they do stand a very good chance of prevailing on the merits. And that's a good reason for you to table this today or continue it to future use, because you're vacating it. What happens if you vacate the street and the court sets aside Ordinance 1804? Does that set aside this action? And of
Mr.
course,
Moyer, all we do is recommend.
you do. You recommend to council.
You know
But,
that, sir.
but you could recommend that they also wait, or you can take the opportunity to preemptive here, just put it on the table yourself, and that may take it out of council's control to some extent. Look on the map there on packet parts 46 and 48. I think it's Exhibit B. It looks like their yellow line is intruding past the coastal control construction line, just a little bit. That would have ramifications if they're going to be paving that or doing anything to that part there, which is seaward of the coastal construction line. I don't know that they have permits for that. It's flood zone VE. You haven't discussed the implications of that, of putting a parking lot there. Stormwater, where does the stormwater going from that parking lot? You're just going to trust everything to come out perfectly here? Or, you know, I know they have architectural drawings in there. And there also are 4 properties shown to be vacated in yellow zones there. And that's not listed. I don't know if that was listed in the newspaper ad. I didn't read that. But it's not listed on your notifications here from council, or from your staff to you as board members here. So, other than that,
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Moyer. Is Jason, any comments on his issues, or just the?
So I was going to address this, so I appreciate him bringing it up, I guess. Condition number 2, which deals with the utility. I would like to add to that at the end of water line, comma, unless the town decides to do so. So at just as a background, it is very typical for developers to modify, extend, change, add whatever utilities, and then turn it over to municipalities. Our water department has staff that can handle that and take care of that. So just because the point was, whoever can easily do it and readily do
You
it.
would add under condition 2, within the right-of-way, if the town decides to do it?
It was just simply the end of the sentence, a town-owned and operated water line, comma, unless the town decided to do so. So the condition was
town
making
decides to
the
do
applicant
so.
do it, but
I understand, okay.
they can work out.
It's not the people doing Estero to do this.
I know.
Just saying.
The town has their own staff.
As I
that-
still have that construction project in front of my
I
house.
understand. I understand.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
Yes, sir.
No further public comment? No? Okay, so we'll close the public hearing part of this and go to our own discussion. Any comments, folks?
I would comment, it seems to me that this is something that has been extensively discussed at both the Land Development Code and the Town Council. And while I appreciate the gentleman's comments and his concern, most of what he said to me was not relevant in terms of the issues before us. And as a consequence, I just simply think we should go right ahead. I mean, we've discussed at some length the merits of this of the relocations of the easement and the vacation here. And I would move that we approve the vacations as presented.
Moving that the 0002 Canal Street vacation be approved. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. Second to that?
One thing.
Wait,
Oh.
is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Second, Jane. Okay.
Well,
Megan?
before I did that, I was going to specifically ask you too, do you feel that we followed procedure completely on this, that it's been advertised appropriately and we've followed procedures?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure
Because it
that's on
does
record.
say Block A and Block B.
There's full legal description of each of these vacates, whether it's plot property or the right-of-way, within the advertisement. So everything you saw in your packet, the ad is a pretty long ad, and it's the exact legal description of the property. So, I mean, meets and bounds and all that, right?
Mr. Chairman, let me just jump in here a second. Would you poll the members in regards to ex parte communications, just for the record?
Is there any ex parte, just for the record?
Not specifically on this.
I just had a conversation with John Gucciardo, just saying that it was coming before us,
Yeah.
and that's it. I didn't ask
I
any
gotta
questions.
see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Dan, you said no? I
Said
I
I
had a
haven't.
conversation with John Gucciardo also. Scott? No? No. Okay.
Just real quickly.
Yeah.
Because I'm the only person here that voted no to the original application, I still think your project's too big. But I am acutely aware that I serve at the pleasure of our town council, and I know that this panel has a lot of wisdom on it, so I'm going to vote yes to this in deference to both of those things.
Okay. Well, thanks, Dan, for your thinking about that. The motion has been made. I assume we're
Clarification.
going to, conditions of approval have not, Dan, are you assuming, or would you care to expand on your motion to approve to also include the conditions of approval, Roman numeral 4 on page 78?
Well, yes, clearly those are, essential to the vacation.
And point 2 of that condition, adding the language, unless the town decides to do it itself, right? Yeah,
And I
okay.
second that.
Okay. And our seconder agrees. Any further discussion? No? Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, that passes unanimously. We'll go right to 0003. This is 1160 Estero. Vacate a portion of the right-of-way located between 1160 and 1172-74 Estero. Any further comments from the applicant, John, or anybody else? No? Jason?
Just, again, they're related, even though they're different rights-of-way. It's a 12-foot right-of-way. Frankly, by looking at the aerials and the use of the properties, they're already being used, quite frankly, as part of a parking lot, other than public access is really what it was giving. This, again, will allow kill and combine, and it was part of the analysis of the receiving a public benefit, the better, wider right-of-way, safer right-of-way as part of that in the future versus these incremental right-of-ways.
And
And
you,
so-
just for the record, you would agree that this is for public purpose?
Yes, the public benefit of
Public
what is in
benefit is
exchange
clear.
is greater than, yes, what is
Okay.
provided. And then again, I apologize, a reference to 170002, that was the rezoning. I'll swap that out for ordinance 18004. And in condition number 2, we'll add the same language that we did in the previous one, which is unless the town decides to do so. I don't believe there's any utilities in this right-of-way, but just as a precautionary.
Okay. Public comment? Mr. Moyer, any further comments? No, okay.
And can I, I'm sorry,
And
let
then
me, one more thing, because of his comment. The owner of the adjacent lands is the applicant. So that's why when he mentioned owning of the, he doesn't, Tom Torgerson or TPI does not own the land. They
He owns
do
the
own
adjacent.
both sides of both of these vacate rights away that they've asked.
Yep.
And by law, on a vacation, the title passes to the adjacent property owner.
Yes, sir.
Jason, did you look at that diagram and see what Mr. Moyer was talking about when he talked about it being a little bit forward of the coastal construction line? Is that?
Sure, so that's
I
the
just
right of
looked
way.
at it.
That's the right of way, right? That's the described platted right of way. So it has nothing to do with the improvements that are within it. So once, if vacated, then that becomes part of the project property, and all of those have already been reviewed as far as the limits of their improvements.
So they do not encroach?
No. So our area that they will be constructing for the town also is limited by that, and that's not, from what I've seen on the concept plan of that, that's not an issue either.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. I think that's good to have on the record. Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? You're right. You.
Public hearing, too. Please open the public hearing.
I will make the motion to approve. That's the second vacation on point 3. So it's vacating 180003, right-of-way vacating 1160 Estero
With conditions.
with conditions.
And the additional wording of,
Language of if the town were to do it on its own.
I'll second that one.
Second by Jane. Further discussion? No? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And then third one, vacating 180004 and
What?
0005.
Back up, I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
I apologize.
What?
Easement? I forgot.
What is it?
Can we add a condition? I apologize. The Lee County last week, basically, we've confirmed that they would need an easement. Either if you want on the public record, confirm that we will add that with the council, or you're going to work with the Lee County to do that. Maybe we don't need to do that in a condition to back. I don't want to back up, so if we don't have.
We can back up.
Well, wait a
Well,
second. Let's-
procedurally,
Do
can
we
we?
need to?
Okay, so the answer is Lee County needs an easement somewhere in the area of this 12-foot right-of-way, ultimately for the light that'll go in at that intersection.
But that's their, I mean, if they already have the easement, what do we need to make it a condition?
Well, part of it was going to be because they can use the easement in an area that was right-of-way. So, but I think we can handle that outside of this if.
Can we
Jack,
back-
any opinion about that?
I think I think what they're proposing is sufficient for our
So we
purposes
don't
here.
need to add another condition?
I don't think so, no.
You could add it at council.
And we understood the need to go down that path, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
We're
sorry
not
about that.
backing the bus up.
No,
on
I
this
just
one.
want to make sure
Okay.
that you,
So we've not changed procedures.
and
okay.
frankly, we don't know how big it's supposed to be, so I wouldn't be able to describe it. It would just be,
Okay.
okay, sorry about that.
Okay, so we've introduced the topic of 0004, 0005, vacating the Crescent Park. Block A, 1204, 1206 Estero, Block B, 1172 and 1174, and 1188 and 1190 Estero Boulevard, 231 and 221 Canal Street. Discussion from either the applicant or Jason? I guess I want on the record, just as we have before, that this is consistent with what we approved previously and what the council approved.
Yeah, so essentially, obviously, this is different than the right-of-way. This is essentially vacating the underlying lots, and part of that is, from our perspective, was generated out of assuring that what was granted for development rights is what the assurances that the council was given is that's what they got, so that there's no underlying opportunities or provisions to expand that outside of what was granted through that rezoning. That's kind of how this was born. And frankly, it's just a way also to kind of clean up property, since we've had a lot of older plats throughout the community. And it's a way when somebody consolidates land that they can vacate it and clean it up, and then it's a tract that they will then develop accordance with their concept plan or rezoning. And just for the record, again, it's same owner. It's on both sides of the right-of-way that you just discussed under 0002.
Same four conditions of approval, correct?
No conditions on this one.
No conditions on this one because there shouldn't be any utilities on their property. If they are, they're private utilities.
Okay.
And so that there's no need for sidewalk additional things or easements. So, yeah,
Crescent Park has no underground utilities, huh?
anything that's outside of the right-of-way should be private.
Crescent Park's not private.
Crescent Park. Yeah,
neighborhood.
the name of the plat of Crescent
That-
Park. So
yeah,
anything
it's
with,
not- we're not
anything
including
with,
the park.
so there could be potentially, like across the street, north of Estero, they have service lines within the private land. But again, that's private use service lines. The town generally maintains up to the meter and or right of
Okay,
way.
well, you swore to tell the truth.
I did.
so, All right. Any further comments? No? John, any comments? No? Okay. Any comments from Dan? No? Okay. All right. Motion to approve those two. Public comment. Thank you for the reminder. Mr. Moyer?
Leon Moyer for the record. This is item number 4, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And I had a question regarding why, I still don't understand why you didn't just give a right of way rather than giving up the property. Now, maybe they already own all this property from ordinance 1804, or maybe they bought it outright, I'm not sure. The other issue is I didn't get to look at the map yet here, but outside of Crescent Park, there are those 2 portable restrooms. They have electricity lines running to them, and I don't know from where they run. They're underground, I believe, because it's air conditioned. And maybe this area may have those electric lines on them or running from there. And I'm not
Okay.
sure of that.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Moyer. Appreciate it. Jason, you can clarify?
Sure. As I guess I'll state, applied to all the applications you've seen before, you have received letters from utility providers and other entities that they have no objection to the request. So that would apply here. If there's something on site, it's probably a private service connection that then would have to be dealt with in accordance with that provider's disconnect and reconnect and all that.
And you have, yeah,
Make a motion to approve to vacate 18-0004 and vacate 18-0005. To include Block A and Block B. And do I need to put in all those other addresses?
probably good for the record, please, Jane.
Okay,
If you could just read the,
1204-1206 Estero Boulevard and 1172-1174 and 1188-1190 Estero Boulevard, plus 231 and 221 Canal Street.
at Block B, 1117, you mean 1172, right?
Yes, I
Thought
meant
so, but then
72
again, my
and
hearing-
1174.
Okay, fine.
And
The
there are no
motion's been made
conditions.
and clarified here, and this is 0004, 0005. Second,
Second it.
Megan, and any further discussion? Nope, okay. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Okay, we passed that. We'll take a 5-minute break before we start the next one, okay? Thanks.
There's a reason for this.
On this weekend.
Oh, I did see a dolphin and 2 babies. And I'm seeing many more sheephead and baitfish. Crabs and I've seen blue crab and stone crab. Never seen at my.
We may not be around much more, but so it goes.
I was going to ask you to do some math.
Please don't. That's why he's here. He said he was gonna ask me to do math, and I said, that's why you're here.
But I still have my shoes on.
Because the last hearing I said that you guys don't let
I
me
can't
math.
do anything more than 10.
Retribution yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
yeah, I would,
And are we
I'm
checking
not allowed to
why
math.
that gave us
I freely admit this.
Pretend it can't be math.
Have a solution.
Then I get to addition,
Well, what do I need to do? Because I think that needs to be.
Thank you, guys.
No problem. Russ is talking about my other case, so I feel like I need to stick around.
But when we had public road, And the better question is how they're using their parcel. Terminal, airport, terminal, and piers. What can we put on a property that is classified? Certainly not boat trailers. And vacant industrial, how can we have three? Somebody living there. On vacant industrial, we're not allowed to park a trailer on our vacant industrial, and they have.
And she's gotta have a script.
People don't, nobody knows the new
Well, and his restaurant.
Now, remember that the last case he took, they got
I've had a couple August was wiped out, September was wiped out. We're starting to get reservations rebooks, but they're for less money. We've had to drop our prices. Somehow we were full Saturday, Sunday, and yesterday, and I've only got one room empty tonight. Oh, I wasn't full, that's right, somebody canceled.
I canceled that. Well, you just don't even get me started about that.
I charged $50.
I got one at DeSoto. Oh my God, the amount of plug giveaways that they have. Actually, they did a sharp.
You know how many cars they had in Brooklyn last night? Maybe 400.
Yeah, I'm full, I'm at $100. I went from 150 down to 100. I mean, I'm on this.
That's all I wanted to do, and they're charging me.
Now they're like, we just claimed it. And the people around them were like, yeah, come take it. I'll maintain it.
Upstairs, get a cup of Joe.
I'll see you, Russ.
John?
Yeah, no problem.
A cup of coffee and some breakfast. We'll pay the difference. We'll pay the difference. I promise.
Oh, he just said by that.
Yeah, well, he doesn't really
So you ready?
need to be here for this.
Probably not, for most
We're
people.
just discussing text. For the secret.
Text on ordinance?
Yeah, we're gonna have a workshop.
Cars, the whole
Yeah,
car.
but-
He didn't even negotiate on the room he was supposed to be in.
Did you actually 500 feet with a letter?
No.
Not required for vacation?
No.
Now, some of those have been rebooked. I mean, I'm giving full refund from a if it's for red tide. I mean, there's some hotels that aren't. There's some people on Airbnb that aren't. They're crazy. You've got to be as transparent as possible. I mean, certainly if the family, if there's older gentleman has CPD or, allergy issues, I'm just like, look, and I'm telling people now,
I don't
look, the
even
water.
think you need to have CPD.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I tell people water's better, but I still wouldn't recommend going in the water.
You know, Neptune's telling people that they could get in that water.
The other day, I got
I
a
spoke
mile
last
from
night
my
at dinner
house,
going,
and my
well,
dad kept
Neptune's saying
saying,
people
well,
are getting in that
because
water, can we get in the water? I said, I wouldn't dare do it.
This?
I said, especially if you have an open sore, I wouldn't do it.
And I'm trying.
I said, it may be clear, but it
I'm
ain't.
not letting my dogs in this.
Yeah.
Pepper in there.
No. It may be clear, but it's still here.
Water does seem clearer.
It is. What's
pretty.
crazy, that the other day, I was down at the wind shifted offshore. All of us.
Yeah.
Crazy. Every person in that bar.
Yeah.
Eyes watered. No, it's open.
But like I say, we're gonna figure. Lung fungus.
Yeah, right.
It's overexposure to red tide.
Yeah.
Turtles.
We should
Don't
have
mess
it.
with them.
Say one.
He never gave me one.
I only saw one this weekend in the Keys. We went to the turtle hospital.
Did you?
Yeah, that place was pretty cool. It's slit. Yeah.
What key is that on?
That's actually truly on Marathon.
That's right.
You have to make a reservation.
As a volunteer, you mean?
No, just as a
You-
tour.
well, so just so you get-
It's all about
and the thing is, we never know
I'd
if you-
love
what
to
you
have a
get,
report here
it will be
and
what he
do a
gets.
presentation, because what they really talk about is talk about why the back. They took out this turtle and they put it on the table in front of you and said,
Okay, we'll reconvene,
and then
please.
you get to see all the turtles and feed all the turtles.
I hope nobody ever looks at my side.
You're
Okay.
not eating bags, you're eating jellyfish.
Do you want to just
Um,
generally summarize and then?
Sarah, are you handling this section?
Hey, Ray.
Oh,
They've both been working on it, so
okay.
we thought.
Ray, are you the point person on this? Please explain to us the red underlining so that we can move along.
Good morning, Ray.
Good morning.
Thank you. You have the floor, Ray.
Okay, so I'm Ray Burns. As everybody knows, I am the environmental tech for the town of Fort Myers Beach. So today we're looking at sea turtle code amendments. Basically, what we're trying to do with these amendments is to, excuse me, we're trying to update the code. And this is necessary for a couple of reasons. Our code is pretty old for turtles. It was originally written back in, I want to say 1995, 1998. We're due for an update. There's been massive changes in what is acceptable for sea turtle lighting in regards to technology and fixtures and those types of things, and they're not included in our current code, so we need to bring them up to par. Our code, as it's written, is a little unclear in regards for compliance, what people need to do, how they can do it. It's kind of left in the air. So in this code, we provide new sections to provide more guidance for owners and for what the protections of sea turtles should be. We actually moved some sections around in order to provide clarity, so that way people actually understand what we're trying to do in regards for sea turtle protection. And then we also created a sea turtle protection zone. Now this is due to the fact that our current code is written so that any building that has a light that can be seen from the beach is required to have turtle lighting. And that's very much on the person who's doing the inspection after the fact. Also, with permitting inspections after the lighting has been put in place, you can kind of judge it from the permitting side by going out and looking at the building from the beach, but it's very much on the permitter and the inspector where we want to make it more forward, so that way the homeowners and the property owners are aware of what's going on and they can make that judgment call for themselves. So let's get to it.
What you're asking us to do is to approve the red lines that
Yes.
you've added. And this is the amendment to the Land Development Code section.
Yeah, so as a workshop, we try to prepare draft language for you on certain sections and get your feedback on it. If you see something that you think is crazy, take it out, edit it, whatever. Not necessarily getting in wordsmithing everything, but general concepts of what this accomplishes. That's why I think Ray was probably going to start going through section by section just to kind of hit on what the changes do.
Exactly.
And then just so you know, our goal is to get your feedback, go back, and then with something like this, include the turtle community, if that's the right term.
Yes.
We have obviously some Turtle Time and some other experts at our disposal in the community that help with this sort of thing and get their additional feedback on the technical side of it additionally.
Okay, well, we'll kind of go page by
One
page
question.
if there's questions on each page.
I didn't technically see any differences between the one that we got last week and this week. Were there any specific changes that I might have missed? Okay.
Part
Pretty
of
much
our
the same.
workshop packet.
I didn't
We didn't
see
get to
one.
talk about it, so we just
Yeah.
left it as is.
Any comments on page 170?
Yes, I have one. Down in, about 2/3 down the page in the red section. Looks like the line went through it, but I think it was meant to be below it. It was a one or more point sources. Ray, what is a point? What is a point source?
Well, the easiest way to explain it is if you're looking at it and you can point to it and see exactly what it is, that is a point source.
Oh, oh,
Where the light's
what
emitting
is a
from?
point source
Yes.
versus a source?
So the,
Like a bulb
Yeah.
versus
Oh.
an area being lit?
Oh, okay.
yes, exactly.
I see, okay.
Right.
Is that okay, Dan? You,
And that's
Same.
actually why that was not meant to be underneath it. That is a strike through. We
Oh.
don't want it to be a point source. It needs to be the light because the light is the issue. So it isn't just if a bulb is visible. There are other ways that you can have an illuminated area. we
So
removed-
that what's in red in that sentence is really eliminated. Take it back out. Is that what you're saying?
yep, he's black lined out,
It's
right?
in the original code, it's just now getting,
Yeah,
Why
I
is
think
it in?
What they were saying before is it's almost too limiting, where you have to see the exact light itself versus if you have spillage from behind a building that's creating faults or the turtles to walk up towards that way, that's an issue that we need to deal with. And this
So you're
only,
saying not just the light, but if it's underneath the awning, but the light's still going above it?
Yes.
It's still light, not exact.
And
not
it's still
necessarily the
causing-
bulb, still the light.
right, the light itself, the lighting
Lighting.
creates the disorientation.
Right.
It doesn't have to be just the bulb
bulb.
itself, but obviously we need to address the lighting and the illumination total.
That's also clarified on page 171 where the word point is eliminated. Any comments on 171?
On 171? Yeah, how do we arrive at 600 feet? Is that how far turtles can see or what?
We had done some.
171, which point is it, Dan? Could you?
Well, I want to know why, I want to know how,
The
600.
sea turtle
why
protection
600
zone.
feet and how did,
Where'd you get
what is,
600?
Yeah.
what is the rationale? I mean,
In our research of other codes, there was creation of sea turtle protection zones, and this is to provide more clarity. The 600 feet from the mean high water is basically out to the other side of Estero. I mean, the majority of the time, most businesses and homes that are within, either side of Estero can be seen from the beach, depending on like if there's other buildings in front and stuff. Beyond that, there really isn't a whole lot of light issues that come forward onto the beach unless you're in a high-rise condo, but there's not very many of those that aren't right on the beach.
So this includes the houses that are on Estero?
Yes.
Okay. Because Jason and I had this conversation, my house is on Estero, and we never, ever had an issue, which is fine. And last year, our pagoda light was challenged, and then this year, all of a sudden, the inspector saw the light on our front porch. So, I mean, that's fine, but I think having this, is there a way we could say on Estero, or we just want to do the feet, linear feet?
We can look at, I mean, whether property's adjacent to Estero too, I mean, we can describe that. We can look at describing that differently.
Okay.
And make sure that's consistent, because the width of the beach to Estero changes throughout the island, so yeah, we can double check that, but that's a good question.
And it is our intent as part of this code to create an overlay on a map so that it's clear which properties would be included. You don't have to figure out and measure yourself.
Right, but I would think, I would think you should have some language in there that houses adjacent on Estero or properties adjacent on Estero be included, whether it's 600 or 633 feet.
Due to the north and very south sections of the beach being, the Estero comes a lot closer to the beach than the midsection of the island, we'll take a look and see how far over if there's overlap between that 600 feet versus just on Estero Boulevard.
600 feet and/or if the house
Yeah.
is adjacent to Estero, maybe.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dan?
Ray, I'm not sure this is a lighting-specific question, but it's a sea turtle protection zone question. Are you familiar with a very recent piece of legislation that's passed at the state level that talks about turtles in relation to the mean high tide zone and private property landward of that?
I think was that the FWC thing that we,
Yes, I believe so.
there's, it was FWC or DEP?
It should be.
One of those agencies had an email out that was shared around about limitations on sea turtle nest protections on private property.
That's what I'm talking about.
And about basically instructing, what my take on that was essentially, since we have like a private nonprofit organization on the beach doing, and we support them through code enforcement, essentially telling everybody, you can't go on private property and affect those property owners. They have property rights. That's what it seemed like, that they were instructing everybody to stay away from those private properties that don't trespass, essentially.
It's pretty much our whole beach.
Depending on the survey, after yesterday's discussion with the council, depends on the survey and obviously what is owned. That's true. It's going to be different. It's not consistent all the way down the beach. Is that kind of what you're referring to? as far
That
as-
is the information that I'm referring
Yes,
to.
and
I'm
I believe
just-
theirs is based on that.
I'm wondering
statute,
if there's
or the-
any part of that that affects this lighting question that we're
I
discussing.
took, it looked like from the email that we got, it was specifically about the nests and documenting and trying to label and put the netting or whatever around, protection things around nests that are on private property. I think the lighting is more of a land development code standard. I mean, you could technically have this lighting for the whole island if you wanted to. So I don't think it impairs the lighting opportunities, but it does have an effect on the actual physical protection and documentation of the nests.
Nests themselves,
Mhm.
and moving nests or whatever.
Yes.
Jane?
Thanks.
I have a question about how, take a condominium, and on each porch of the condominium, typically, there is a light that is put in through the condominiums. And then later, the owners add a ceiling fan that typically has another light on it. And how will those be impacted, and how will we educate people about that? So take that ceiling fan, how would that be dealt with?
Well, we always do a yearly mail out so that, the community is aware of sea turtle season coming up. In regards for the code enforcement side of it, how we handle things is we don't single out individual unit owners for turtle lighting. We get in touch with the common element of the condominium association and go through that as opposed to direct homeowners.
And what does it say in here that those people will have to do with those ceiling fans? I just want to understand the whole picture from an owner's point of view. With the light that is there and the ceiling fan that light is there, what
Well-
will they need to do?
Well, both of those lights fall into lighting requirements within this code. If it is a light that that is within that 600 feet
Linear feet.
requirement, it's going to fall into this code. So,
So it will have to be
should not be
shielded?
on.
Yes.
And it will have to be turned off?
correct.
During
Well,
the
not
entire-
necessarily turned off. That's not the goal of this, is to turn off light to make things unsafe. The goal of this code is to provide people other lighting options that are turtle-friendly, but you can still see outside.
So
So,
what would be an option in a ceiling fan on a porch, to have a ceiling fan on a porch with a light?
well, instead of doing bright white bulbs, you could do amber LED or red LED bulbs. You could do.
Now we're going to look like a red light district.
There are temporary shielding you can put up around the light that you could remove after sea turtle season.
There
or
is
just
actually
keep it up all the time.
a thing that is available at
Yes.
Home Depot or Lowe's.
Yeah, well, there's not shielding available through Home Depot and Lowe's yet. There's a lot of sea turtle organizations that are working on that. But as of right now, most of the things that you need to get in order to be sea turtle compliant are available online, and you can purchase online.
And so for a single unit in a condominium, approximately what would they have to spend to become turtle compliant? If they're in stock? Just curious.
Well, and just before she answers that,
For the light bulbs themselves, they can range anywhere from $10 to $30, $40, depending on how nice of a sea turtle light you're going to get.
So a light bulb,
Talking about the
Could
fixture or the
fix it.
bulb
No,
itself?
the bulb
itself.
itself can be anywhere from 10 to more expensive, depending on how nice of a bulb you want to get and how large of a bulb you're getting. And then for shielding, you can go very low tech, and I offer this heat resistant, what do you call it? Insulation. That's basically like, it's a silvery material that resistant to heat that you can cover the light bulb with, and if you circle it right, it directs the light down, which is pretty cheap to get from Home Depot. If you're going for a true turtle fixture,
I bet that's attractive.
if it gets you in compliance, it gets you in compliance.
Well,
I will take
in
it.
some of this, if somebody's adding a ceiling fan and running electrical, they need a permit. And hopefully, as part of this, that's the first stopgap, right, is to catch that during the permitting process so that it's done up front. Otherwise, it's a bulb swapping out. It's, during turtle season. Again,
So-
it's not before May 1st or after, October. You can go back to your normal bulb.
Somebody's swapping out a light fixture with a ceiling fan, they're not getting a permit.
No.
Well, I understand. I was thinking if somebody's installing a new ceiling fan, if they're installing new electrical, they need to, when they need a permit and they get one, the goal is to
Even
also
still
catch it
there.
at that time.
All right. Okay, page 172, any comments?
Well, I don't know if it's on any page, but what about a situation where a light is within the 600 feet, but it's along Estero Boulevard, but there's a building between the light and the beach, and the light is not really visible from the beach, but it's still on, and it's 600 feet, within 600 feet.
Well, my understanding is that we're trying to make these rules more uniform and apply to everyone, as opposed to an individual going out and spotting problem after problem after problem and doing things that way. Even though there may be a building between your residence or your place of business and the beach, it doesn't necessarily mean that the light won't go through some way, shape, or form. So I believe in writing this, these are gonna apply to everyone.
To enforce? Is that what we're after, something easier to enforce instead of something arbitrary?
Yes.
Yes.
We spend
An inordinate
a
amount
lot
of
of
time.
time
Okay.
dealing with these issues.
We get
Well-
anywhere from 60 to 70 code cases a week on turtle lighting.
And it's hours and hours and hours of staff time.
I
that-
can vouch for that. Yes, it does. It takes hours of time.
But I think Scott's example was a good point of, 1 year it was okay,
Well, never,
maybe, but we get these all the time
I
where
don't, yeah, and I.
they pop up.
And look, I'm all for the turtles, and I had no problem changing my light bulbs. But I think in my case, for 20 years since, they started turtle time, my light bulbs weren't a problem. Now that we have some code enforcement, now my light bulbs were. So I think we need to have a uniformity, and we also need a grace period. So when this code comes into place, we got to give the homeowners a chance to A, know about it, and B,
Here and
fix
do
it.
something about it.
Now, here's the other problem that's popped up. I've got some neighbors who, it's not just changing the light bulb, it's changing a fixture, and that's where it gets costly. So, I
That's
think,
why,
I think there,
Scott, because there are no light bulbs.
it's
for their
it's a
fixture.
whole kit, and you can't just change a light bulb.
Solid kit, it's a solid section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in that case, I think we need to give a grace period for, it's gonna be costly for some homeowners, because if they have so let's say they have all these lights, and you're gonna have one goofy looking new light, so they're gonna wanna change them all out to make them uniform. So it's not as easy as just changing a light bulb.
And I agree with you. There's also been essentially a grace period since 1998.
Right.
While the enforcement's picked up because of problems with the turtles, because of the disorientations, right? So all we want is compliance. We're not into fining people. We don't want to do that. We want compliance. We want the turtles to be safe. And unfortunately, I think
Sure.
Ray can attest to, we're dealing with generally the same properties
Over
and
and
over and
over.
over.
Right.
They've had, I agree with you, but they've also had their
Right.
Well,
time. And 10 years ago, if they changed the first time they had a problem, or 5 years ago, they could have swapped that.
A lot of times,
Unit
new owners, I'm not just.
And that's the
fining-
biggest issue right there, is new ownership and education. So we'd rather spend the time on education than
Right.
picking out light
But
sources.
I think, once this gets all done and we all agree on it, I think there should be some semblance of a grace period. I mean, and we should get the word out before May 31st, not
And that's
April-
why
April
we're
18th.
attempting to work on this now, because we're still in sea turtle season. So by the time this is kind of settled out more, it'll be right after turtle season. So it'll give people about 6 months to work on getting things into compliance.
What's even crazier story is, so we changed out to the pagodas, and we were sitting outside one day, and there's 4 adults, not drinking, they're changing out my light bulb, and we're screaming, what are you doing? Well, we can't see the light, we always know where your street is because of the light bulb, now we can't see the light bulb, so we miss your turn. I can't make this up.
I know. I have had people switch out turtle-friendly bulbs for blue party bulbs because they wanted a more festive atmosphere on their rental property.
Thank you for saying that. We wondered if that's what was happening on some of these properties, and apparently it does.
Had I not been outside, and we had probably had 10 people over, and see it for myself, I wouldn't have believed it, but it actually happened.
It's hard to believe.
Do you have a
It is-
discussion with
people
them?
do
Oh, yeah, we had a
amazing
discussion.
things.
They were
do.
they were turtle experts by the time my wife was there.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank my wife, but yeah.
Any comments, page 172, just to go back to that one? On the second paragraph there, this is 1474, exemptions. Why did the change from town manager to town council for that authorization? That really seems to be an issue of timing and bureaucracy to not allow the manager the
I think the
authority.
concern with that was that typically the town manager is not in favor of giving exemptions for things that may not be necessary and typically does want council to speak up on how they feel about that issue. And there aren't very many instances where we would want to grant an exemption.
See, so, but the manager is not, is burdened by that in some way?
As a general rule, he is not, we're not doing very many administrative variances. Typically, they're going to be going before council, and that's been the direction.
Well, and I wouldn't say it's just this town manager either. I would say
Will there
it's
be a
without
fee?
criteria. Would it be a fee?
I mean, people have to pay a fee to
Apply for an exemption?
apply for an exemption?
Honestly, I could see that actually being more used for bigger projects or redevelopment projects, and they would have that process already built in, than an individual unit coming through an exemption. But technically, no, there's not a fee right now.
Okay,
I think there should be.
I don't either.
Well, the exemption, I assume it would have to be a safety issue, right? Somebody would
Yeah.
be saying that there's not enough lumens in the amber light bulb to light my stairwell or
And-
whatever. I
So on
mean,
the administrative side, we struggle with exemptions, variances, that sort of thing, without specific criteria, right? Kind of more of a black and white, very specific. I think you've heard the town manager say that last meeting was, spell it out, we'll go by that, everybody can go by that. Really, that gray area is where we would prefer the council and the LPA live in, making those decisions, those policy decisions, because we get it from both sides. So
Is it enough to, trying to think of how to say this, I have no interest in throwing any turtle under the bus, but I do understand the need to balance public safety with what's best for the turtles. And at least my experience with a lot of amber and red lights is they don't put out the same brightness on things like stairwells that
That's where
traditional lights.
angle and height comes into play a lot. A lot of lighting is up overhead and shining light downwards instead of a more, I don't want to say a better placement, but when you're working with that wattage of lighting, if you have it lower, like the bollards that you see along sidewalks, which are about like hip high, they shine the light downwards and you can see the sidewalk very well. And growing up in a sea turtle community that's one of the highest rates of sea turtle nests in Florida, they go all out. And all the sidewalks have these turtle-friendly bulbs with bollards on them, and you can see exactly where you're going, because I've done sea turtle walks, walking sidewalks with these lights on, and you can see exactly where you're going. So it's not a matter of taking away the lights, it's correct positioning and using a sea turtle friendly bulb to make things kind of meet in that middle road.
But I think the point being, I mean, that section we'll look at and consider
I'm just
the
making a
process.
point that I get
You're right.
there's a tension, you know, what's best for the turtles is no light, no artificial light, and what's best for people is pretty bright lights around things like stairwells. So we're trying to find a place in there somewhere that we all can live with. And I don't know if there is additional language that I just hope that we aren't, in our interest of doing what's best for the turtles, compromising safety. That's all.
It's fair enough. And I think we will.
If I could address that as well, safety. Smuggler's Cove has been cited, and for the lighting that we have, which illuminates the access driveways. And those lights have been there for years, and now all of a sudden you say there was 6 giving time, but we've been scheduled, cited and set for a hearing before a hearing examiner for lights that have existed for years and have lighted our driveway entrances, which lighting is there for safety purposes. Now, maybe we can work out something, and I'll talk to you about this, Ray, separately, to comply with this. But you do just emphasize what Dan's saying. You have to weigh the safety factor along with the interests of the turtles, because I don't know why all of a sudden these lights are bad when they've been okay for years. But just bringing that point up.
I think it's well received from us. I mean, we agree with that statement, those statements.
Well, and I think some of the bit when it comes to lighting and such is that technology has caught up and we've learned more of what is good and what is bad. And those standards are going to change with everything moving forward as our knowledge gets better and technology gets better. So what was good back then, we can do better now. And that's, I think, where we're seeing some of the differences now. You know, 10 years ago, no real such thing as a turtle bulb, but you needed to use a low density light. Well, now we have something that truly we know works because of better research and better technology. And I think that's where we're seeing some of the changes too.
And honestly, the enforcement side of it is the disorientation. If there was never a nest out in front of a condo before, but now there is one and there's a disorientation, that's partly where we learn, oh, okay, maybe that light beside the building. So I've learned a lot about this just through unfortunately, the good and the bad of that's happened during the season. So.
I was just telling the guys I was at the Turtle Hospital this past weekend down in the Keys, and one thing I did learn, especially here that we have the green sea turtles, is that they will lay a nest 1 year and take like 2 years off and come back. So you have different turtles coming. So there may not be one in front of that condo today, but next year there might be because of which turtles come back. So, I mean, that was extremely interesting that we can't say it's the same turtles that are coming back here and putting their nest in the same spot.
Well, this is going to be a continuous argument forever on trying to bring people into compliance, because unless in your utility closet you have a stack of turtle lights that describe to the renter, if a light goes out on the porch, you must put in these lights as opposed to these lights that are in the condominium, and during these months you need to keep your drapes closed. People are going to replace whatever's easiest to access and get to put in the light if there's one broken or missing. So in bringing people into compliance, what are the options? I mean, do we have another $500 a day fine in here?
Yeah, there's a fine.
No.
It's consistent with the existing process.
Oh, but wait, in our fine schedule, consistency was 100 for the first time and then it goes higher, and we don't do that anymore consistently.
Well, I respectfully disagree. I think the difference was the approach was those are special requests for things. Okay, that aside, this doesn't change anything from the normal range of what there is available. We are actively trying to find people that are very bad violators of these for years that have been ongoing. We want compliance, right? I mean, Ray's out there every other week or whatever at night talking to these people. We want compliance. So sometimes we get criticized that it takes too long to bring something to a hearing, to find people, because the turtles are a very finite time period, and they're going to hatch next week. We got to get something done. And so we're trying to find that balance, but we really just want compliance. We want people within a couple days or a week, change a light bulb. If you can't and you need a new setup, tell us, we'll work
Well,
with you.
if we have to get them online, say you go to the Lani Kai and say, we need all of these lights changed, well, he has to go online to order them. They have to be shipped here, and that's a week later, and all the eggs have hatched.
Well, let's hope we're not finding that the week before the eggs, right?
Yeah.
So,
Megan, you had a question?
That brings up a good point. What she was saying is, I know we keep saying we want education and we want compliance, but nowhere in here is there any type of education requirements, like, I hate to bring up the word short-term rentals, but there is no must provide a copy of the ordinances to them. There's nothing of that sort in here that states that I saw.
Short-term rental should be informed.
There's no information or no requirement of education by those who own the houses that choose to rent their house and make money off of it to provide some sort of, I know brochures are a little bit much, but to at least provide the ordinance or a summary of the ordinance to their people. I know some people do it voluntarily,
Yeah, we do.
but as we know, there's a ton that don't. And maybe that we have some sort of education requirement here that you must provide a copy of this ordinance or a summary of this ordinance, something of that sort in every rental unit to help educate the renters and the visitors of what we've got going on here, other than the sign that's at the beach access. Because visitors don't really use the beach access if they're renting a house on a Estero. They're walking out the back door.
Right. Thanks, Megan, that's a good point. So you'll note that? in
Yes.
the Comments. Okay. Page 173, any comments on this complete red sheet?
I have one on 74, which is
Okay,
addition
well,
to
let's see
73.
if 173, no? Okay, 174 then?
On the existing dune, walkovers may be lighted. If the beach closes at dark, why do we even have this provision that they can do lights all the way out to the beach?
Well, there is the possibility of condominiums having their own dune walkovers. So I believe that was trying to keep with the private organizations that may have dune walkovers in their area, as opposed to town. Yeah.
in private property.
I get that, but also, technically, they're not supposed to be out on the beach at night.
If it's their property, they can be on the beach. You know what I mean? If
That
they
is
own down,
true.
that's the struggle. We have all these properties down to the water, some of them don't. We have, the dune walkovers are in different places, so it's really speaking to that smaller group, subgroup of private lands.
Dan?
Can we talk about these ground level barriers? I think it was EFG, if I'm looking at the right page. Maybe I'm not looking at the right page.
Which one?
You know what, I don't have the
173
same
is the-
numbering that you guys.
173 near the top,
Okay.
G, construct ground level. Okay.
So let me tell you what I assume those are, and this may be inaccurate, so please listen, to make sure I'm accurate. I assume those are that shielding of some kind to keep, vehicular light from getting out onto the beach or whatever?
Yes.
Is that what
It's
we're talking
It's
about?
mostly for that. And there are some places that could use ground level barriers that are in, for example, like the critical wildlife area, which are far enough away from the beach because they have like the swampland in between them, that you're far enough back that you don't need to, if you put a ground, like a giant hedge up, you still won't see the light, as opposed to, shielding it and having to hide the source of light and doing things like that. So that's kind of where it's for.
What about at the end of every beach access, or like the place out by Publix that has an open, parking area beneath it? Or I can think of any of a number of places that if vehicles pull in, they're going to shine lights out on the
Yes,
beach.
and that is ongoing, I don't want to say battle, but that is an ongoing discussion in regards for parking and how to address that due to ground level barriers and fencing in V zones being somewhat of a touchy subject. So
So we want to maintain a view corridor.
yes.
I just think we need to
super
think that one
important.
through a little bit.
I think it makes a difference too, whether there's, the property is all ground level or whether there's a high seawall. Because we had that argument at Smuggler's Cove some years ago. Because people pulling into the driveway and park underneath the building. The building's open on the ground level. So the headlights were going right through. But at that time, we had the beach was about 12 feet below the ground level. So that was a factor.
That's going to be a factor on
Yeah.
many, many, many condominiums.
And next
And-
door, the property, there's no seawall at all. So the lights, cars come in, it goes directly onto the beach. So it varies.
Well, I mean, Sunset Grill, completely open. I mean, you can just go down one by one, and anything that's open, that was one of the things we wanted was the view corridor, and now we're going to say you have to have a 4-foot-high hedge to block car lights from going in. That
Now,
eliminates.
that's not a requirement. That is a suggestion for how to come into compliance. That whole list is a list of things that you can do in order to bring your property into compliance. So it's not a mandatory, you must do this, you must do this, and you must do this.
But
I
even
don't
This is a
understand that.
list of describing what you can do in regards to different ways you can handle your lighting situation.
Okay.
But how
But
else
even-
can you do that? I mean, if they don't have to bring that into compliance, how are they in compliance?
I'm not saying that they don't have to come into compliance. This is a list of ways to come into compliance. So it's different avenues you can take to bring yourself into compliance as opposed to saying you must do all of these things. You can do this or this or this or this.
So how would you bring a car into compliance if they were not going to put bushes up?
Adding.
Well, I think if you're talking about under building parking, you can screen some of that and you're not losing the view corridor. I think the focus of the view corridors is the area outside of the building footprint. I mean, I personally have a preference if all the buildings didn't have enclosures and stuff underneath. I think that would help with our views, but where we're going is more enclosures, but wider areas outside of the building footprint is the direction that most construction has been going. So we're talking 20, 30-foot view corridors from Estero to the beach, adjacent to a property. If you have parking lots, then you have to have landscaping adjacent to that anyway. And if you're parking under your building, I think that's a relatively simple way to screen some of that is either through some kind of screening, some kind of landscaping, and you're not blocking a view corridor underneath the building of a parking area.
Is the town going to put up netting on the end of each beach access?
Heading at the end of each piece.
Yeah. Some barrier there, because, as soon as a car drives down the
street.
road
To the beach access,
to the beach access, they're shining their lights out on the beach.
which I think we have time limit supposed to use that, so, dark, I think.
You have streets that
It's a
go
good-
right into
Mhm.
and then they can turn left or right. So you do have that shining through that little, like, right there.
I'm not suggesting we do that, by the
No,
way.
but-
I'm just saying.
What
I-
we're talking
I
about is
think this
also
is
limited in time, right? You've got a car drive down the street, that's different than a light shining constantly. So I think the vehicle travel stuff is a limited, short period. The screening of the parking lot, really, you pull into your space and turn the car off, hopefully. Hopefully that's
Oh,
not,
but there's
I don't think
100
that's as big of a
100
problem
properties
as
pulling in at night.
is constant lights or the lighting from underneath of the parking area shining out. That's a constant. And again, that's a safety balance versus a visibility balance.
In her example of this, Orlandini's property.
Sunset Grill.
Sunset Grill, thank you. The parking lot next to that, where it is just simply people pulling in and pulling out. He doesn't have to put a barrier in because that's short-term lighting, like you just said?
I'd rather avoid that specific
Okay.
site.
That would
That's
be
what
the
she's-
same with
but that's
every
what she's
condo,
asking.
too.
But that's what she's asking.
I
right
know,
now.
but
Jason, you're
frankly,
getting
that's
to be
gonna
a
get
real
in-
politician.
that's going to get into a
But that's what-
failed one at that,
But that's
right?
what you were just saying.
If we could come
Yeah.
up with another example, frankly.
Okay, in
I know
season,
you don't like the
Please.
name.
Okay,
You don't like the
let's-
name, but that is one of the better parking lots that truly does go through to the beach
It
like
does,
that.
it does.
let's
One of
use
few.
any condominium that doesn't have a hedge, that those 100 people that live there are going to go in and out every night, I assume, for dinner or whatever, and come home. So that's 100 times. That's not constant, but it's got to be pretty good count.
We had to put in a hedge all along our parking lot when, as part of the development order, when we did put in the pavers in the parking lot. And
Was that on the golf side too?
on the Gulf side, of the Gulf side of the parking lot, so that there was a hedge from,
View corridor.
extending from the sides of the buildings out to our boundary of our
On the
property.
roadway,
No, along,
the house?
in the middle of our property.
In the middle.
In the middle of our property, a hedge that didn't exist before. We had to do the parking lot, but that was a requirement in the land development code, and for the purpose of blocking lighting from the parking lot to the beach.
So
We had to
those-
put in a 3-foot hedge all along from one end of our property to another.
I don't like that at all. I don't like blocking the view corridor all the way down. It'll be a solid
Well,
fence.
it was 3 foot.
Well, I know, but that's because you chose to maintain it at 3 foot. But if they put in sea grapes grow very quickly, and they're up to 10 feet, 12 feet in the summer. So
Again,
we're going to not have view corridor
we-
because of vegetation.
We're never going
ahead.
to have a view corridor because of other reasons, but I think that's a bigger discussion too.
Sarah?
I think the key to this is that this is for existing developments and bringing existing developments into compliance. So if there's a violation, if there's an issue, and typically that's going to be a disorientation, that's going to be something where the turtle folks are going out and looking and taking pictures, and they aren't looking at a car with headlights that they turn off. They're looking for the constant lighting. So if there's an instance where a low hedge might resolve an issue that's existing for a community, this is just an option for them.
Okay.
So we're not saying you have to, every place where there could be lighting, put in a low hedge. That's not the intent of this.
To piggyback on that, I mean, my personal opinion would be to pay less attention to vehicular traffic than to fixed lights.
Yes, and that is the intent of our code compliance folks generally.
Good point,
They're-
because that's
they're not-
moving and it's,
And there wouldn't be
terminate.
any way to
It's
determine
terminate.
whose violation that was.
that's good. I had a question on, this is 175, pet peeve, the mechanical beach raking, you're taking out that language, and this is page 175, paragraph parens 2, and this is 1478, additional regulations.
We just moved it to a different location. It's still in the code. It's just we scratched it out because it's no longer in that specific place. It's towards the end. It's over on page 177. It's like the second portion of that page.
Oh, okay. Okay. And no change?
We are not
to it?
getting rid of mechanical beach raking requirements. That's not what we're doing.
Okay. Is it the same as what was blacklined?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like it's just a reordering of the number to put it in a better flow. And we'll adjust those numbers as we go, and we find other sections got to be adjusted.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
I have-
Turtle visitor person.
I love my turtles, very passionate about the turtles. One other thing that I have, and I walk the beach a lot, and we take pictures of the turtle crawls, Scott does all the time too. One other thing that I've noticed a lot of, and maybe this is handled some other way, and maybe we cannot handle it in here, is all the personal beach furniture is left out all night long. And it's not pulled back into the properties, it is sitting right out there, and that is a hindrance to. So is there anything that can be done in here code-wise to get that stuff off the beach at night during season?
For beach furniture, there's a whole nother section that regards for beach furniture and their nightly removal requirements and compliance with the sea turtle code, so.
That's
It's for-
commercial. I'm
okay.
talking residential.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. So that could be something that we could put in here because furniture is not good for turtles. They could get stuck
I think it
and.
needs to be put in.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
you can't believe, well, I go for a walk just about every morning, and the amount of furniture out there is, it's crazy.
And the holes,
It gets closer and
And the
closer to the
holes.
rack
and
line.
the holes.
Yep, holes
And
too.
holes is a never-ending battle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
is,
by-
sure.
So if it's in
They're
here,
deadly.
then you've got some then you've got some teeth to it, but
Yeah.
it's the, and this is pre, water issues. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, especially on a Monday morning, the amount of holes and the amount of furniture left out, and, it's one thing, a couple beer cans, but I mean, you can see where they had a party, they didn't drag their stuff in, and turtle tracks are right next to them, and it's,
I've got pictures of turtle crawls through holes. They got too exhausted. It became a false crawl and they went right back in. They had to go through a hole. I've got, right out here on our beach, we've got them coming within that close of furniture. I mean, just up and down the beach from our pictures in the morning. If there's some way we can work to harden this a little bit, I think it is beneficial. If we're really going to protect the turtles, we need to really go.
I'm
Pork
for a beach furniture inclusion. I think that would be a good idea. In regards to holes,
I
I'm
know.
not quite sure how we could regulate that.
That might just be the education piece.
Yeah,
well, yeah, at least do the furniture piece, because it,
yeah.
It could be a request for any holes that are dug during the day should be filled in before dusk so that, first of all, people don't fall in them. Because people are looking out like this, they're not looking down when they're walking the beach. I do it all the time. I don't fall in them, but
Okay,
So far.
thanks very much, Ray.
Knock
Is there any
on
other
wood.
final
We have any wood
comments here? No? Okay, thanks, Ray. Appreciate your attention and hope we helped clarify some of them.
do
So,
we make a motion on this?
do we need a
No.
motion? No.
Says
So-
discuss draft.
It's just a draft. This is part of our LDC workshop effort, right? So we'll do this with each of these sections we're working on, is bring them back, get your feedback, and then go back and redraft some things based on your comments.
Okay.
And then do the outreach to the other other groups.
LPA
Other,
members?
just,
items?
the
Go ahead.
other, just as a very general comment, one of the things that was oppressive to me about reading through this was the extent of it. And my concern with regulations is always that they can get so complicated that people, even if they
Can't
want
enforce
to,
it.
can't
Sure.
possibly follow. So I'm sure you're doing everything you can to keep things as consolidated as possible and still give yourself the ammunition you need to do code compliance. But I just think you need to really pay attention to that when you write these things up. 'cause-
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky enough, obviously Ray deals with the permitting and the turtles on a regular basis. Sarah helped draft the language. She's a very good code writer. But again, all of that has to, I agree with you. And the public process of flushing that out, we may sit in a room and write something that we think is brilliant. And then
Well, I think it's brilliant.
and
It's
then in
just-
practicality-
It's a lot.
well,
It's a
that's
lot
true
of
too.
brilliant. I mean, it's.
and then in application, maybe it's not so brilliant. So this is the part of the process that's really important to kind of
Okay.
fine
I
tune.
think,
You're
people
right.
really do want to comply. I think, I've
All we
not
want.
run across anybody who doesn't like turtles. So I think, it's just, education is important. And I think whenever you're educating anybody, simpler is better.
Yeah.
As long as it's complete and
Clarity.
gives you the ammunition and all of that. But
I mean, it's
but-
2 to 3 days a week of a staff person's time
Wow.
to follow up. You got the night,
Yeah.
they go out, you've got to follow up with the
Yeah.
violations, you got
Yeah.
to send the
I
letters,
agree.
you got, I mean, it's,
That's not an exaggeration. I will go out on a Thursday and there's another code officer because 2 years ago I did it all by myself every week going out and I almost died. So now we have 2 weeks of me doing it and then 2 weeks of a code enforcement officer doing it and we swap out. I will go out on a Thursday. I will come into work on Friday, do all the sea turtle prep stuff. Occasionally I will come in on Saturday because there's too much stuff for me to be doing and we'll continue the work on Monday. Letters usually go out Monday or Tuesday for any notice of violation, courtesy notices, notices of hearing.
and you have re-inspections.
Yes.
and then you have more letters, and then you gotta
Yes.
take it. So that's a lot of time we could spend on education, right?
Thank you very much
So,
for your hard work.
But
It's
I just
very-
feel, I think we're lucky this time to have our staff that we have. We have some, especially, you know, Sarah here doesn't get enough credit. She didn't say much, but she's very good at code writing. And so we're looking to utilize that throughout this process.
Don't die, Ray.
No, don't die.
I think she
Turtles
I
are
think she meant
important, but-
figuratively, not literally, but. hopefully.
Member items, Megan, any?
I'm good.
You're good?
I'd just like to say, I think the water's looking cleaner at the edges. I'm seeing stone crabs and blue crabs, and I saw a dolphin with 2 babies over the weekend, and I saw 4 manatees all at my property, and I'm seeing more bait fish and everything at the seawall. So I do think things are clearing up. We have a long way to go, and there's where some education is needed.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because I saw a camelon on the
Thank you.
truck on the beach this week.
Yeah.
That's another thing maybe we should look at, is having a ban on chemicals that we
do
put
have
on our
somewhat one.
pesticides.
Dan, you have any comments? No? Scott? I'm good. Daniel? Yep,
Well,
you have the floor, sir.
I'm still having a lot trouble with the town council's action on the Dollard case, and I don't know whether now is the appropriate
Oh,
time
that's
to
a
bring
great
that up, but I do want to discuss with staff some of the consequences and ramifications of that, and I disagree with some of the comments that were made. I pulled the minutes of that, and find very disturbing the thought process and the rationale being utilized, and I don't agree with the concept that this does not create a precedent, because Jason, as I recall, when this Dollard case came before us originally, the rationale for you, in which you encouraged them to proceed along the lines of the pre-disaster build back, was that there was a precedent. What was the name of that case?
Roe.
The Roe case. It preceded me, but anyway, there was that precedent, and now we have this, and now we're saying, the council members are saying, and that it's not a precedent. In my view, it clearly is, and I think it's precluded a council member in the future for saying, well, we can't allow this because it violates our comp plan. They've made their own bed in that regard, and I'm concerned that. Well, let me ask you this, Jason: if there hadn't been the Roe case, and these people came to you with with those facts, if there wasn't that precedent that you alleged was a precedent that had been created by the town council, would you have encouraged them to proceed under pre-disaster had there not been that precedent?
So I don't like to use the word precedent, but the Roe was an example of a case where the council approved a deviation to that criteria in the land development code. That was the example that the applicant submitted and said here, and they are correct, the town council voted to approve the deviation to that section. So it wasn't me encouraging one way or the other. We sat down, I know we had multiple meetings here, and we've talked to them over a year and a half, previous staff, me, trying to find an avenue. All they wanted was an avenue. When it came down to it, my statements to the council is the difference between what the comp plan states about square footage versus what the LDC states. That's the only criteria statements that I made related to that. So my statement of the Roe was done by previous councils have interpreted that you can deviate from that section of the land development code. I would still stand behind that statement. Doesn't mean that anybody else could ever get anything, because I think everything is unique. There's 1,000 other reasons to deny things. There's 1,000 other ways to condition things. So I don't know that the precedence of approving something means every other case has to be approved for that reason. That's what I heard the council say. I don't want to interpret what they're saying, but what I heard them saying was, this is unique, whether you think it's unique or not, that's what their opinion was, to be able to approve that. So, but my point is the difference between the LDC and the comp plan. That's the only stance I took.
And that
tonight.
difference being what? The intensity The interior square feet?
The difference between the way it measures square footage. So the
Well, I
LDCs.
don't agree with that either, because, I mean, you stated in the minutes that there's no specific limitation on interior square footage in the comp plan.
There's not. It says,
I don't agree
Okay.
with that. The comp plan specifically says that it's only can be improved up to the existing density and intensity, and while the language, it says up to the original square footage, and you're saying that's different than interior square footage?
Correct.
Well, then how come later in that same provision of the comp plan, where it says the town council may approve additional in a commercial area, that if the existing elevated property exceed on property allows, wait a minute, the town council may approve additional enclosed square footage, and again, in the last sentence of policy 4.1, it makes reference to the pre-existing enclosed square footage. Now, is enclosed square footage different than interior square footage?
So, I don't know if you want to, what I was going to say is, we either got to decide whether the whole paragraph applies or it's split between residential and commercial. So the second part of that you read, everybody keeps telling me it only applies to the commercial uses, doesn't apply to the residential. So
Well, I agree with that.
Okay, well then.
I agree with that, but it's creating an exception to the preceding.
I understand.
It's creating exception to the preceding language that says cannot exceed density up to
Density and
original square
intensity.
footage.
And so Dan's point is that the definitions, though, whether they were applying to residential or commercial, are the same. Definitions of those terms.
And
Density
what
and
I said originally in front of you guys
Interior square footage.
was, I think the easiest
You don't
track to
agree.
solve, I don't agree that the beginning part of that paragraph applies the same way as the second. No, I don't. I
Okay.
think the intensity and density that it's referring to, unfortunately, the comprehensive plan refers to floor area ratio and that sort of thing.
I
There's a
think
fix for this.
And see, I don't see FAR being involved in this at all.
Okay.
I don't.
And it seems to me if there was a ambiguity or lack of definition about those terms, that should have been dealt with as an issue with the comp plan and LDC consistency, rather than giving an exception based on some doubtful conclusion.
And that's been my statement to
We
you
were
and the
not-
council.
We were not uninformed about all of that, Jason, as you well recall, and we took a very
Yes, sir. No, I
strong-
agree. You weren't, absolutely. You were very well informed, and my statements were consistent in that I believe there's ambiguity in that policy. And my suggestion too is we need to look at that and correct it and clean it up quickly in the short term as a means to address some of your concerns.
With what we dealt with in one of the first cases here today, that dealing with Band-Aids is not the same as surgery.
I agree with that. And the difference between the LDC and the comp plan, sometimes you have copy and pasted from the comp plan into the LDC, sometimes you have 90% similar, but it was tweaked. And you really shouldn't have that. You really should have a policy set forth, and then you should have the implementation of that in the LDC.
Yes, we should. Jane, you had a
And
comment?
I want to just make a statement also on the record that after our first meeting, Megan did ask for the row case to be provided for us at the second hearing, and it may have been provided in this much, in a 2-inch block of information on the sheet, but it was not informed to us in the capacity that, number one, it really doesn't exist anymore because the expiration of time to do what was provided to the row case had expired, and he had sold the property. So that killed it as something that we should have been able to use as consideration as a precedent. And so now we have a new one that is much larger and current on the books that people can come forward with, and I think they will. Have we had anybody come forward with something yet?
No.
They will.
They will.
And again, the question at hand was, can you deviate from that square footage limitation in the LDC? Whether a project is expired or not, wasn't relevant to the question. The question
I-
was,
I believe-
has it been done? Can it be done? Has somebody interpreted and found that it has?
And-
That's why their application included the
Well, there's a
relevant-
second question, though, which is that deviation consistent with the comp plan?
Yeah.
That's,
And-
I mean,
and-
that's a, if the answer to that question is no, then the answer to the first question is no.
Right, so the challenge that we have is when we go back and look at this, you ask about variances, has somebody else gotten a variance in the neighborhood? Have we done this? Have we done that? And you look and you see a town council has approved and found it to be consistent and has deviated from that, then the answer is yes to us, right? Unless there's another interpretation or a change. That's the
But
struggle
they
that we
did-
have.
They did nothing to the comp plan language.
They found it consistent with the comprehensive plan in that hearing.
They did not clarify whether or not it was consistent. They just said it was consistent. It's as if we didn't have the comp plan language.
they made the
As Dan has
statement-
quoted it clearly time and again, the language is clear, no increase in intensity or density.
And our mayor made the statement that
That-
residential and commercial are the
And
same.
that language is in both the comp plan and the land development code.
You know, no matter how you
Yeah.
slice that pie, the language sticks.
Yeah.
Well, and the consideration was supposed to be really given for if you raise a property, if you need elevators or doorway entrances to get in for handicap access to the corridor of the foyer,
if there
or
were-
for the bathrooms to be enlarged for handicap access, that those enlargements could be considered, but not 6 times.
Well, anyway, we've beaten this
Yeah.
horse, so.
Well, I'm concerned, if somebody comes in tomorrow and with similar facts, what does the staff tell them?
Well, we'll still vote the same, but it'll be
They're
interesting
now
what
going to,
town council does.
they're now, I think their hands are tied.
I mean,
But our point is it doesn't, there's 99 other factors that go into it, so it doesn't ultimately
No, there's
mean-
not.
There is, there is.
There's not, there are, but there's only one factor that we're talking about.
Fair enough, but
Making
the,
it bigger.
Okay.
but the plan development process and the review.
And to me, for the council members to rationalize this by talking about other factors is irrelevant. You can't use other factors like, oh, well, it's less than if it had been, you know, on the originally commercial property, and they could have that so many square footage there if it wasn't the pre-disaster build back, or remarks like, well, we did this with TPI, so we got to give them a break here because,
It's not
or
commercial.
that one Joanne Champ's rationale was that it was kind of words to the effect that it was a nice design and nice development, and the neighbors didn't comply. Those things are not proper considerations.
Those things are exactly what the plan development process asks you to review. That's my point. It's not one factor and you automatically get it. All the other things that are frankly subjective, is it a good project? Is there a public benefit? All these other things are to the review of you and the council and decision on whether they are or not. So all those other factors, I get what you're saying is that individual thing, but it doesn't mean they're going to get approval if they don't meet whatever those guidelines and criteria are. They're not spelled out in the code. It's not a number, but it's in the eye of the beholder when they do the review. That's the way the code was written.
You know that the Dullard case took 2 years to get ultimate resolution because your previous colleague, Matt Noble, said he would not recommend it. Clearly on the record, told them, this cannot work. It is inconsistent.
I disagree with that. He told them it could work up until the last day.
I'll show you his email when I checked with him when we considered this case, where he said, I did not walk them down a primrose path with regard to whether or not this would pass.
We had a drafted approval staff report up until the day before. So that's not the point. I mean, I understand where you're going with this, but the problem is it was a
I'm not
challenging
going
issue.
anywhere. I'm just quoting Matt Noble's comment to me.
And that's
did
inaccurate,
not.
unfortunately, because I was told the opposite of that.
It
So
seems to me, though, that the spirit of the comp plan is clear, which is that if you're making it bigger under pre-disaster build back, you can't do it. That's
Can't
the,
have the
that's the
same number
spirit
of
of it.
units. You can't do, if it doesn't fit the property, you can't have both. That's combining two things to make the comp plan fit the property, and it doesn't.
Doesn't. Well, anyway, I
Anyway,
think we made our point, folks. you know?
I think
Reasonable
And,
people can disagree. but
I think I would like us to
We
draft some
surrender.
changes and make some things clearer or, and modify what we can to move forward and achieve what
Yes.
you believe is the goal.
Agreed.
Well, do you think that a rationalization by Councilmember Shamp, that she approved it because the neighborhood context, she considered the neighborhood context, and that was critical because it was improvement over what they could build under pre-disaster? Do you think that's an appropriate rationale for approving this?
I can't answer that. That's not my place to judge whether their action was appropriate for her rationale. I mean,
But that
they're
go-
required to create a rationale and say a reason why. They created reasons why.
Okay.
I wish I,
And
I'm not,
may
it's
the
not my place to say
sunrise
that.
in the sun, right,
Yes, sir.
okay, fine. Dan, any further?
Oh,
Okay.
I'm done.
Yeah, we maybe all be done. Right. Thank you very much. Any comments from you guys?
I have one.
What's next?
Well, okay, so next month is a date. Is there an opportunity that we can move it a week by any chance? The council moved their hearing to the 10th because of Labor Day, September 10th. You would be back-to-back days, and there's two reasons why that's an issue. Back-to-back days makes it really hard administratively to process everything. And secondly, I won't be here. Not that you need me here, but
So instead of the 11th, the 18th, is that what you?
that would be my request, yes. Right now, we believe we have two cases. Hopefully, the one that we talked about today, the variance, we can get it around to that. And Sarah thinks that we have one other variance coming forward. Other than that, what I plan on bringing to you was, what we talked about last week related to the edits of the rounding up section, some options on there. And then the other thing I was going to bring to you is we've developed specifications and things related to driveways and curbs design and all these kind of designs that make it easier for people to get permits. Essentially what they can do is they can say, what we want to do is get your blessing on that, and then what we're going to do is make that an appendix related to the LDC. And so it's not something that has to be modified. I think we talked about this before. It doesn't have to go through the normal text amendments. It can be updated per standards, DOT standards, that sort of thing. But it makes it easier for people to get permits, and they don't have to get an engineer to do something. They can pick a design criteria.
Paul, Megan, can you make?
Those are the two things I was going to
I
make.
can make the 18th.
Jane?
I'm not 100% sure because I just rebooked my flight so that I could come back on the 9th so I could be here for the 11th. I have to look at whether I have
You're
to.
not sure.
I'm not
Dan, can
Sorry
you?
about that.
I have the same, I'm not sure. I have the same issue. I'm,
Good, okay.
And it could be another day.
I can do the 18th.
It's up to you guys.
Scott? I can do the 18th. He can do it. Dan?
What was the date
The
again?
18th
18th.
instead of the 11th of September.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I have
No?
a problem with that.
You don't have a
I
problem?
don't think so.
Okay, so that would be 1, 2, I can make it 3,
let you know
4.
today.
And if, again, if there's another day of the week, if there's another week later, we can adjust to whatever. And I'm suggesting just having the one meeting for September since we're moving the date.
Well, my suggestion is that since Lori Wolf's not here, maybe you could send an email just to that and just poll us. It looks as though we're on the cusp of 4 versus 5, so.
Would you, I mean, is the following week okay if that, a week wasn't available for some reason?
I don't know.
Got to
on
go
that
back
one.
out of town, but I just
That
can't
would be
figure
the
out.
23rd?
No, that'd be
Yes.
the 25th.
25th, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find a time that we could do a meeting if possible.
I just don't.
Like I said, it could be another day of the week, but we learned this month that it's extremely complicated to have these back-to-back meetings with the administrative stuff.
Yeah, it is, very
I
complicated.
can't, I
We did
just
it last
can't
week
answer
and-
your question
I understand.
at this moment, but I could in an hour or two, so.
I was making notes to myself this morning and realized that we had this situation, so
Okay, I mean, just poll us, I guess, if
Okay.
you don't, if you want to. Thank you.
thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before you adjourn,
sir.
let me just say that after council action yesterday, Mr. Turner and I may or may not be around next month. If I'm not,
What did they do?
enjoyed working with you.
What did they do?
They went with another firm,
Oh. Who?
some guys out of Bradenton.
Conveniently located.
Well, thanks, Jack, appreciate
So
your
we
time
get to
and
pay drive
effort.
time?
We're around, you know.
Well, Jack, when would this take effect? I'm sorry to hear that, and I
I think
enjoyed working with you and on the stormwater
Oh,
as
the
well.
Stormwater was probably the death of us.
Yeah. Well, I hope not, but.
You never know. I know they want to have the new guy here on October 1st, and I don't know if that would be our last day, if there'll be some overlap there, but who knows?
Well, appreciate your services and wish you all good luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks. Public comment, did you have any more, sir? Briefly, please. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ray.
Leon Moyer. Yes, let's start out with an administrative matter. I spoke with Jason about this during the break. The first gentleman here at the public hearing handed out some papers to you all. You gave them back to him when he asked for them. You can't do that. When something comes to the government, it becomes a public document.
He has it. We don't have to keep them.
He doesn't say, he says he hasn't gotten one.
I didn't get, I will get a copy from the
I'm
gentleman.
sure you'll get a copy.
But that's not the point. You shouldn't be even returning his copies. He either has to have enough for you to keep or not hand them out to begin with. And then you probably could take advice from your attorney here regarding entering them into the minutes of the meeting so that they're definitely in the file of that hearing for future use, because now the public has no access to what you had access to. And that's all I need to say on that. Please don't interrupt me, sir. Your policies and procedures manual says I get 3 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, without interruption from council or
Go ahead.
board members. If you have questions later, you may enlarge my time and I can respond to your questions. No, I don't think so either. And also, you can't back up after you have a vote and the hearing's closed. Somebody had mentioned doing that today. You can't. The hearing is closed, you take a vote, that issue is solved, it's off the agenda. And fortunately, you didn't do that, but you were thinking about it. Page 172 should retain the administrative exemption there, I believe. It talks about the town council or town council making the exemption there. And that will be in writing, even though they cross it out, because everything the town does is a record in writing, which is good. I have something here on the lighting issue, which you may not have considered. Section 1476 says, new development must comply with the following requirements. Now, the catch is that new development includes old development. Every time you do anything requiring a permit, whether you're putting in a stair railing or anything, that is new development. So then new development must comply with the following requirements. Artificial lighting must conform, and a lighting plan, and here's the red part, including the location, number, wattage, elevation, orientation, and all types of proposed exterior lighting must be written down. Whichever, and must be for the new as follows, and then they have more conditions applied to that also. But that will be a tremendous burden both on the homeowner and staff. You know, we really don't have that much enforcement of our codes anyway. Council's continually doing things. I hope to hopefully have a letter you can read tomorrow's Observer newspaper saying they passed a code recently, another ordinance that negates itself. One section negates another section in the ordinance. So anyway, these things happen when you try to get too specific and try to manipulate the details of everyone's life on the face of the earth. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Okay, a motion to adjourn. We're being flagged out.
Second.
Megan makes it. I'll second it. All in
Motion to
favor?
adjourn.
We're out of here.
Out of here.
Thank you very much.